Welcome to Down Under World Denizens. This is our very first episode. This is a podcast about Blood Bowl and other sports board games that use tabletop miniatures and are set in a fantasy universe. So I thought I'd like to just start by introducing our commentary team to you. My name is Stephen Babbage. I am called Babs for short. I have been known as Babs for a long time because in Australia, if a word is too long, then we abbreviate it. And so Babs is actually short for Mr. Babbage because that just has too many syllables. So Babs it is. I've been around Blood Bowl a long time, and so I'm here on the podcast as a bit of an expert in terms of where has Blood Bowl come from, why are things the way they are in Blood Bowl. And so I had some privilege of being involved in the Blood Bowl Rules Committee back in the day, being involved in the formation of an organisation called the NAF, which we will cover in a future episode. But I'd like to hand over now to another commentator. This is Millsy.
Okay, my name's Paul Miller, or Millsy, and just like because we're in Australia, we shorten a word or we add E or O to the end of it, so I'm Millsy. I've been doing Blood Bowl since 2011, LRB 5, and have just loved every second of it, loved the role-playing aspect of it, loved meeting new people. One of my claims to fame is I'm the variant king, so I like to play different variants or add in extra house rules and just make the game fun.
Awesome. And our third regular commentator on our podcast is Dan.
Hi, my name is Daniel Wilton, but obviously Dan for short. I don't have the honour of a really cool nickname like these other guys just yet. Maybe that'll happen in some future point. I've been reading about Blood Bowl in White Dwarf magazine from when I was a little kid. Never really got involved in the sport until recently, when Bab started up a local league, and been keen into it ever since. Happy to play games, happy to meet people, and just roll some dice and have a laugh.
And just to stoke Dan's ego just a tiny smidge here, Dan is also absolutely fantastic at understanding the Blood Bowl 2020 rule set. I would say out of the three of us, he's the one who will pull us up and say, hey, I don't think you've quite got that right, which is a bit embarrassing for me, given I've been around. I've been around Blood Bowl since 94, so it's a bit embarrassing. But
he's
had
also 6 different editions since then. That's fine.
That's it, yeah, plus others. And just to add to Dan's expertise there, he's also fantastic at tracking stats. So he is not only our league ladder maintainer, making sure we know where we are up to with our stats in our local league, but he also tracks the points for tabulating where our Queensland Blood Bowl coaches are in terms of ranking them for selection to a Queensland representative team, which we will talk about a little later this episode. So we all have our own individual expertise, but Down Under World Denizens is called that because we also really want to represent our region of the world, our neck of the woods, which is Australia. So that's part of the reason why we're here. So I thought I'd start by talking a very short period of time on what skill have we put on our Queensland Blood Bowl jerseys. Because we organised for the Queensland Blood Bowl community to have the option of purchasing a Blood Bowl jersey, and as well as having our NAF official name on it, which again we'll come to a little later, and our NAF number, which helps you track your games. It also has a skill on the back that describes you as a person, which is a lot of fun because a lot of skills can mean several different things depending upon how you view it. So, Millsy, what skill do you have on your jersey?
Well, as you'll find out through every podcast we do from here on, my favourite team is Slam. What do? They leap. And I'm the variant king. I can't just have something normal. I've got to go obscure. So I went back to 2nd edition rules and went heroic leap.
And tell me do you know what Heroic Leap does in second edition?
I believe Heroic Leap, you could leap 3 squares as long as it was into the end zone to score.
Correct. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. So there you go. Both Mills and I admitted the other day that we have never actually played a game of second edition.
No, never.
I actually came to the game right on the release of third edition. When I went to my local stockers to buy Blood Bowl, they had just stuck it on the shelf and they still hadn't updated the pricing on the shelf. So I got it for second edition price, which I think was a deal.
Okay.
I think so. Let's go back a long day. In fact, yeah, that was Dee's comics store in Belconnen in the ACT in Canberra. And I believe she's still there to this day, all these years later. So, okay, Dan, what skill do you have on your Blood Bowl jersey?
I'm proud to rep the unchanneled fury of the Minotaur on my jersey. It's a reminder to myself to try and not be as bullheaded as I can be sometimes. So I'm trying to be my best self, but it's a reminder that I don't always succeed, and I strive to be better every time.
Excellent. Well, it's the old wild animal.
Yes.
Yeah. So Wild Animal was in Blood Bowl and Blood Bowl 2 on Steam, which I've played far too many hours of. But yeah, I've always liked Minotaurs. They're cool. So yeah.
Fair enough. And I have Leader on mine.
I'll point out that you were nominated by a group effort that you would have Leader. It wasn't just that you picked it for yourself.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I didn't vote for that.
What, you're going to give me Bonehead?
Yes. really stupid.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'll take that. And I think Leader is great as a skill because when you give it to a player, it makes the whole team better. And that is kind of my goal with Blood Bowl is I want to contribute to the community. And so that's why I love Leader as a skill is it makes the whole team better as a result. And that's what I aspire to do. Personally, I've been around Blood Bowl a hell of a long time. And not as long as some people, I guess, who are in second edition days. But I do really want to make sure that the Australian Blood Bowl scene is a better place as a result of me being a part of it. Some people would debate whether that's true, and so I want to put it on the record that that's my goal from now on, at least. And I think, there's some really positive signs, and we'll talk about that a little later in the show. But before we move on, let's talk about favourite race. Now, we're still talking about Blood Bowl. As mentioned, there are lots of other versions of sports tabletop miniatures in fantasy universes, but we want to be quite narrow here. We want to talk about Blood Bowl, even though the same choices could also apply to Blitz Bowl, which is another variant. Let's talk Blood Bowl. What is your favourite race? Now, I'll go first this time. I fell in love with Dark Elves before I even played Blood Bowl. I actually wanted to pick some miniatures to paint. I still have the team on my display case, which is right next to me in our man cave here, and yeah, so I picked those Dark Elves. I've painted them up. I've been a Dark Elf coach ever since, and I just love their play style. I love that ability to bash if you are up against a weak team, dash if you are against a slow team, and have an aggressive running game. And being able to adapt according to what's going on the pitch. So that's my reason. Dan, what about you? Favourite team?
My first love as far as Blood Bowl goes is always going to be Orcs. Orcs are a really strong team, but they're also a lot more versatile than a lot of people give them credit for. But they're just fun because they've got more character than the Ponzi Elf gets over there on the other side of the table. They've got a whole range of options for strategy that other teams don't have access to, like throwing teammates. And I've been dabbling with the Snotlings in the last season that we had locally. They made it to the playoffs, so they didn't quite make it to the grand final. But Snotlings are a lot of fun, and they're certainly no slouch as far as team win rates.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true. I think Snotlings have definitely surprised a lot of people who were fairly set in their play style, and Snotlings came along and definitely mixed things up a bit.
Well, Snotlings are almost as good as Slan at showing people that they don't know everything about the game. Millsy?
Well, on that subject, I will point out that those Snotlings were the only team that beat me in the last season. I couldn't get a win over them. That swarming just killed me. However, I wasn't playing my favourite race, which I've already mentioned is Slan. I just love doing whatever I want. People can't set up. They can't set up a screen against me. I'll just go where I want. And if things go pear-shaped, one of my favourite play styles is that scramble defence that I can just, with re-rolls in hand, roll as many dice as I need to and get there. If I'm playing you with Slan and you ever drop that ball, it's mine. I will pick it up.
Which is not completely dissimilar to elves. I mean, if the ball's loose, it's game on.
It's game on. It's, the only thing with Slan is I can, we had a brief chat before we started recording today about war dancers with their leap and so on. And I said, well, that's a lineman on my team. So the ability, every player on my team can leap, or pogo stick in this case, for a 3+ or a 2+ if you're a catcher. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. I do enjoy playing Slan myself, I have to confess. And I just want to put on the record, Down Under World Denizens, we are definitely pro Slan here. All three of us, yep. Yeah, unlike a certain other podcast, 3 Die Block, we definitely.
Are we naming names?
Yeah, why not? Why not? And look, don't hear me wrong. I want people out there, if you're listening to this podcast and you listen to other podcasts and you feel like somehow you're being a traitor, by no means, listen to the more podcasts. More podcasts, the merrier. I've been joking with Millsy that one of the reasons we're starting this podcast is to make other podcasts sound good. So, yeah, I think we want to absolutely support other podcasts. 3 Die Block, I do really appreciate their podcasts. I love listening to them. In particular, Tim really impresses me in the way he organises his tournaments. Huge shout out to them, and we want to aspire to be like them, and maybe even run as long as them.
One step at a time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so I thought what we want to do is talk briefly about the number one game that we will discuss. It's not exclusive as a podcast. I've already been clear. We don't want to just keep ourselves to one game only. But let's talk Blood Bowl for a moment. And one of the big challenges with Blood Bowl is it has a name that doesn't necessarily describe itself particularly well. It's not like you rock up to somebody, oh, what are you playing? I'm playing Monopoly, and everybody automatically knows what you're doing because everybody knows what Monopoly is. When you say to somebody, I'm going to play a game of Blood Bowl, they look at you like, what is that? So I thought we'd start by, if you're talking to somebody who's a complete stranger about Blood Bowl, how would you describe it? Who wants to jump in?
I think the number one description is fantasy football, but with more emphasis on the fantasy and less on the football. You get a whole bunch of fantasy elements like elves, orcs, dwarves, and you get to murder each other, but there happens to be a ball somewhere involved that you might be able to score a touchdown with.
But the trouble is, of course, fantasy football in certain circles means something else, of course.
Well, it does, but it's a play on words for a double entendre in that instance.
There you go. There's cracking out some French there.
Yeah.
So fancy I need a monocle.
Love it.
The way I describe it is a cross between Lord of the Rings football and chess with dice.
Yeah, that's not bad.
And it's Lord of the Rings football. There could be orcs, there could be elves, there could be this. They're playing football. And it's chess, so they move this way and that way, but we roll dice as well. If anyone is still listening after that, then I go and explain more. If they don't, I just walk away.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I'm going to kind of tap into one of the purposes why we exist as a podcast, which is explaining the Australian way of life a little better, because we want this podcast to be open to everybody around the globe to listen to. And so there was a board game that existed in Australia and England, I think, called Test Match. And Test Match was a game which had little miniatures playing cricket. So the pitch, the board was a cricket pitch, and you moved your players around, and you actually rolled a tiny little ball down a little ramp.
Ball bearing, wasn't it?
Something like that. And it went down a ramp of the bowler, and then you flicked the little bat, and you actually flicked it, and it's whether it went into the feet of the other player. They had
You're one of those new players. The original Test Match actually had a piece of string tied to the batter's bat that you pull back and let go of the string for it to strike the ball. That was the original.
There you go. So that game, when I say, oh, do you remember Test Match? That's my opening question to the person asking about Blood Bowl. And I reckon there's about a 50-50 strike rate there of people saying, yes, they remember Test match. I could say, well, imagine an American football version of Test match and then cross it with chess. So it's all gridded up. And you use dice to decide whether you can do something or not. And then it's set in Lord of the Rings. So there's my start with something and then add something and then add something and then add something. And
the other way is you can always say, do you know what Warhammer is?
Yeah, it's true.
Which is a loaded question in itself.
Yeah.
But if someone's vaguely aware of what Warhammer is and you say, well, how would you feel if you played American football with Warhammer miniatures?
That's not bad. That's not bad. I like that idea. That's not bad at all. And it also acknowledges the company, because I think the company itself is probably moving from being called Games Workshop to being called Warhammer.
All their stores are rebranded as Warhammer stores.
Yes.
Whether Games Workshop as a company ever rebrands itself entirely...
Well, the website has just changed over.
It has.
So it's not games-workshop.com anymore.
It redirects.
Yeah. So, just before we jump into our next section, I just wanted to... We are an Australian podcast, and I do want to make sure that we take the time to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, of the man cave at which we're recording this in. And so I'd really like to just shout out to the Garang people, the Garang, the Byerlee, and the Tarablang Bunda people of this region. Gladstone sits at an intersection of 4 Indigenous people groups. And we'd like to acknowledge that they are the traditional custodians of this land, and we would like to pay our respects to past, present, and future elders of those people. And we absolutely welcome any Indigenous people or people who affiliate with it to our podcast, and we'd like to say welcome. And in fact, we were talking pre-podcast about just one of the things that makes Aussies the way we are is how accepting we are of other people, generally speaking, and that's something that we absolutely want to acknowledge and respect. And if anything, Aussie Blood Bowl should have more Indigenous people than it currently does.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the only racism you're going to get here on our podcast is against elves. Dan will agree with this one.
100%.
Right, okay, it's 2 against 1 already. I can see this now. That's it. I remember there was a podcast I was listening to and they were talking about the tiers of teams, like performing at different tiers. Like you've got tier 1 teams, tier 2 teams, tier 3 teams. We may talk about that at some point. But I was like, what about elf tiers? Because you've got to have plenty of elf tiers, particularly if you're dwarves. Play on words there. So anyway, just wanted to have that formal acknowledgement there. What I want to do now is talk about what are we going to actually have in our podcasts. And rather than spending ages just chatting about what do we stand for as our potty, I thought what we do is actually jump straight into a segment. We're not going to run every single segment, every single episode. We are going to mix it up. In fact, we have plans that in episode 2, not only will we have our first guest speaker, our guest commentator come on board, Down Under World Denizens, but also we will have a live cross and we'll actually record a section of our podcast at a Blood Bowl tournament. And that's one of the things we want to regularly do is get to tournaments, hopefully around the globe, and record episodes there. That'd be awesome. But we'll build ourselves up to that one step at a time, as Dan has already put me in my place about. So first segment that we want to launch is called Down Underrated Skills. All right, so this segment is talking about skills that aren't necessarily a skill you come across every day of the week, and we want to talk a little bit about how does it work, why is it an advantage. We want to talk about why do we think it might be underrated, or why do we think its value is higher than what people currently think, and how do you use it on a team, and how do you defend against it. So what are we kicking off with, Millsy?
This time we're going to go with Hypnotic Gaze. With the Rise of Vampires coming out last year, and then several little rule tweaks have made Hypnotic Gaze so much better than it was. 2016 rules or prior to that. So, I'm not sure how we'll start that, whether we will start off with what it is, what does it do, and go from there. And then we can work out, which teams have it, which stars have it, and so on. So let's go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're talking Blood Bowl specifically here. Hypnotic Gaze is a skill in the game. Is it actually? I think it's a trait. It's not actually a skill.
That's right. It's a trait, so you can't actually give it to your players normally. They can't learn them or earn them during regular league play. Vampires generally will have Hypnotic Gaze on them, and there's 1 or 2 star players that have access to it as well, and one that can do it once per game.
Nah, yeah, we'll get to that. But vampires are kind of headline at the moment in the news of Blood Bowl, because vampires have definitely been on the rise, and I don't mean that because they're finally coming out of their coffins because it's nighttime. What I mean is that they have lifted in the rankings. So the NAF, which in case you're not sure what that means, stands for Nuffle Amorical Football, which is in the law, but it's basically a fan-based organisation that tracks Blood Bowl. They keep all the results for tournaments. So when 2 teams play each other in Blood Bowl between 2 NAF coaches, they track the results of those games. So then you can end up with win percentages of various different races. The Vampires have had a fairly significant change to their roster. We're not going to go into the roster changes. There's lots of other podcasts out there that talk about that. So if you want to hear more about what the changes are to the Vampire team, find another podcast. But as a result of the changes, they have definitely improved in the rankings. So it is a current theme. So yeah, Millsy, do you want to tell us what does Hypnotic Gaze do?
Well, basically, it shuts off your player. It makes them become bonehead. They lose almost all skills until they're reactivated. There's a certain few skills that won't work with, that have to work every time, but otherwise you can shut off that War Dancer that's got block, dodge, mighty blow, whatever it happens to have, go over, hypnogaze it with one vampire, come in and hit it with the next, and it's basically a rookie lineman.
Yeah, and so then if that player has the ball, then...
if that player has the ball, I believe if that player has the ball, they'll still hold on to it.
Yeah, they will, yeah.
It's only if... Yeah, there's other circumstances where vampires, if they bloodlust because of trying to go for something, they will drop the ball. But yeah, if the player's got the ball, they'll still hold on to it. But they can't use things like sure hands to keep a hold of it.
Yeah, but there's this obviously, and I'm jumping down to why is it an underrated skill? You run in, you hypnogaze the ball carrier, and then you have to use hypnogaze at the end of your move action.
That's right. You can move first, but then once you've used Hypnotic Gaze, that player's activation ends.
Yeah. So, but if you're smart, you can put the player somewhere where they can then be an assist for the follow-up blitz action. So you move in, you hypnogaze the player with the ball, and then you're an assist.
Or you Hypnotic Gaze the corner of a cage to open up a hole to blitz into.
Yes. But if you're hitting the ball carrier itself, then the ball carrier now no longer has block, no longer has dodge, no longer has any other skill that's going to prevent them from preventing falling over, including wrestle.
Yes. 100%. The only thing, if it's got foul appearance, I believe foul appearance still works.
That's right, because it's not an optional skill. It is required in every circumstance.
Yeah, I think Hypnotic Gaze is one of the reasons why vampires have shot up the rankings, is because using Hypnotic Gaze well. Yeah, how would you use Hypnotic Gaze well? Well, what kinds of things would you do as a vampire coach?
Well, Dan just said the perfect one is hitting that corner of a cage. Hypnogaze the corner of a cage so you can come in and hit the ball carrier. But there's other things. You can just run up and hypnogaze someone to have a corridor to run through. So you don't
turning off the tackle zone is the big part. So they're no longer threatening squares for tackle or forcing a dodge. So you could walk in and Hypnotic Gaze someone that's marking your ball carrier and just walk off free as the wind.
Yeah.
As we've said, the corner of a cage so you can get into the ball carrier, or if you can get to the ball carrier directly, turning off their block skill defensively makes a big impact. But also just annoying people because they don't always necessarily expect it, they don't plan for it, and being able to do unexpected things is always a winning advantage.
Yeah, and you've played vampires you're playing vampires in our current league, Dan.
I am currently playing vampires, and I've used the skill all of about 3 times in 4 games so far. But so I'm underperforming as far as getting the maximum value out of it. But certainly there'll be there'll be plenty of times where you don't necessarily need it, and it's better just to punch someone.
Yeah, and when the majority of your vampires are strength 4, I can totally understand where you're coming from. But I do think it is one of the reasons why they're performing so well is use of Hypnotic Gaze. And as you say, it means you can't easily form a screen against vampires because they'll just hypnogaze somebody and all run through.
Yeah, it also messes with your opponent as well. I played at the Brisbane City Bash. I played a vampire team down there and got several players hypnogazed, and then it comes back to my turn, and it's prioritising which one I activate first. Really messes with your opposition's gameplay of what they're going to do. And just once you've got in somebody's head, the win becomes easier.
Well, and as you said, there's a side benefit that people might not think about is once you're hypnotic gazed, as Dan said, it's like you've just lost bonehead. Yeah. You've lost your tackle zone. You don't gain that back again until you next activate the player. So if you don't activate the player in a turn, well, they're not just bonehead in one turn, or they're not just lost their tackle zone in one turn. They've lost it over multiple turns.
If the players don't get activated and you have a quick turnover on your turn, you might still have the player hypnotic gazed for several turns in a row. That's right.
Yeah, so this is why I think it is genuinely a top contender for down underrated skills. I have to confess I haven't played the current version of Vampires. I played the previous version of them. I am looking forward to playing Vampires at an upcoming tournament. I'm happy to spill the tea on this one. I'm happy to say that I'm going to play Vampires at Fumble in the Jungle in Cairns coming up. I'm happy to release that piece of information. That's my plan. I want to take Vamps, see how they go in the new. I think their movement 8 runners combined with Hypnogaze is huge.
It's massive.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally understand why the rules designers didn't give the Vampire Blitzers block to start, because that would just be horrendous. But Juggernaut's not bad.
Juggernaut's got plenty of value, and most people will put block on their vampires anyway.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? You want to mitigate against vampires under a deliberate negatrait, if you like, which is their bloodlust. We're not really talking about that right now, but I think once you get your head around managing that, Hypnogaze is brilliant.
Yeah, and the fact that, just touching on bloodlust, if you fail your bloodlust for your action, you can then turn it into a move. And
right, so here's a question for you, for us to discuss. Do we think that the bump to vampires is just traditional coaches getting their head around playing vampires in numbers again, or do we think it's here to stay, that vampires are definitely far better than they were with the Vargeist and the Vampire Runners and the other changes?
I think not so much the bump. I think the slight tweak in the wording of the 2020 rulebook now, saying that once you've lost your tackle zones, you've lost your skills, whereas that was not a thing in previous versions. So you could have hypnogazed me, but I still had my block and my dodge. So that slight tweaking to the 2020 rules has made vampires as good as they are.
Just one quick mention is I believe that Hypnotic Gaze is a special action. So as a special action, it has to be declared at the start of the player's activation. So you can change it to a move, but you won't be able to use another special action if you didn't declare it originally.
Right.
Just wanted to bring that one up there, sorry.
Yeah, and we want to get our facts straight. That's one of the reasons we want to be on this podcast is, we value truth as Aussies. We don't like people who spin political spin. And so, we want to make sure we get our facts straight here. So if that's not correct, we better fix that straight up.
Well, it's coming from Dan, so I'm going to say it's correct.
Yeah, he is our expert.
So, special actions must be declared at the start of a player's activation.
Yep.
Whether you're declaring a special action as a blitz, a foul, a hypnotic gaze, it has to be done straight away. So specifically for bloodlust, you can change it to a move only. You are allowed to move before making a hypnotic gaze, but you can't change it to a hypnotic gaze.
So if you declared a blitz and then you rolled bloodlust, you couldn't hypnogaze. Let's get that right. All right, let's move to other teams with Hypnogaze. Now, we already mentioned you can't skill up and give a player Hypnotic Gaze. Back in way back in 3rd edition, you could do that. There were Skaven gutter runners running around with Hypnotic Gaze, which was horrendous.
No.
But that was one of the first things that was changed in the LRB is they moved it to being a trait. So
instead of a mutation as a skill.
Correct, instead of a mutation. Well done, Dan. And so who else can get Hypnogaze? Let's just run down. There is a bunch of star players that have Hypnotic Gaze, and I think people gloss over this. Let's actually highlight this. This could be a valid tournament strategy, is picking a star with Hypnotic Gaze with the idea of using that Hypnotic Gaze.
You wouldn't be talking from personal experience there, would you, Babs?
I'm neither confirming nor denying that fact. But what we're saying is there is a few star players that have Hypnotic Gaze. And the first up is Karina von Rice. I think you say it
Von Rees.
Rice? I don't know.
It could go either way. But
Sounds German. I'm not a German expert. I have no idea how you pronounce
we're in
it.
Australia. We just call it Kazza.
That's it. Yeah, no, I love it. That's awesome. All right, let's talk about Kazza. She has it, and I was actually chatting to some guys on our friends of the show, Pau Tearoa. They have a podcast, and I'd highly commend that podcast to you if you haven't heard of them. Look them up, give them a listen. And I was actually saying, grab Kazza, stick her on a Tomb King team. That'd be brilliant. Ball carrier. Obviously, she's got bloodlust, but she's got a special skill that mitigates against that once per game. So, awesome potential ball carrier is because she can play for anybody in the Sylvanian Spotlight group of teams.
Teams.
Yeah. So think about what does Karina bring. She's got a bunch of really good skills already. She's got dodge and things. Dan, let's talk about the next star player. One of your faves.
Count Luthor von Drakenborg.
Yes. Yep, the Drac.
Who doesn't love a big guy star player that's actually just the best player on your team because he's got agility 2+?
Mate, he was a beast back in the day. I'm long in the tooth and I often wax lyrical about ye old days when everything was better. But, I remember he had Blodge back in the day. Strength 5 Blodge. Wow. He was a beast. He doesn't have Blodge now.
Sidestep's pretty good too, though.
Yeah, for sure. And he's still awesome. And I think one of the things that mitigates against his cost is if you score a TD with him, you get a reroll as a result. That's his special skill, as long as it's still within the half.
Well, for the next drive in the same half,
there you go.
You get an extra reroll.
So
Some people have been poo-pooing that one because it's going to have potentially limited use, but some use is still some use.
Yeah, I think, if you're thinking about a Tomb King team with Count Luthor, I can kind of understand where you're coming from because you want to score in turn 8. Well, that doesn't give you much of a chance to use that free reroll. So I get their point, but I still think it mitigates against his cost for sure. I mean,
well, if you're taking Tomb Kings and you've got Count Luthor, I think you're trying to score more than once and a half.
maybe. Although
unless you're just trying to have 5 strength 5 players stacking the line.
And what's not to love about that lineup if you can afford it? Goodness gracious! I actually wonder whether he's one of the guys that should be considered megastars and whether people just haven't taken him seriously enough yet.
I think his cost is prohibitive enough in itself.
Maybe, yeah, and I think that's a valid point. But still, I still think he's, in terms of skills that he brings to the table, he's up there. Surely. I mean,
Absolutely.
he's got to be in the same tier as wherever Wilhelm ends up, surely. That's my take.
That's gotta be the same. Yeah.
There you go, red hot take from me. All right, so anything else you want to say about Count Luthor?
He's my boy.
And no bloodlust, right? So that's got to be
no
the best way to
bloodlust
win.
on a vampire is fantastic. Strength 5, block, sidestep, can't go wrong.
And looks good doing it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, pick one, Millsy. Who are we going with now?
Well, I'm a slam player.
Yep.
Lustrian Super League.
Yep.
We go with Boa Constrictor.
There we go, Boa. Now, Boa's got a really, really interesting skill of her own. Her special skill means she can basically snatch the ball by telling you to stare into my eyes. But that's not the only way she can get people to gaze at her, because she's also got hypnogaze. So, yeah, fill us in.
So, yeah, Boa Constrictor, dodge, hypnogaze, prehensile tail, safe pair of hands, sidestep, movement 6, strength 3, Age 3+. I don't have a lot of star players for my slam team, so Bo is the man. Or
Snake thing.
Snake thing.
I have to say, I'm surprised that Boa's name's even pronounceable when you look at the name of the team in the lore. But like the Snake Man team in the lore is a bunch of S's and other consonants. Like it's almost unpronounceable. Boa also has Hypnogaze, so I think Boa's got to be one of those underrated stars. I think he is a sleeper.
Yeah.
Particularly for only a $200,000 inducement cost, which is relatively affordable depending on the tournament package, or for people playing in leagues where they've lost a player or two and they need to make up the difference.
10k more than Estelle 11-0. Who are you taking, Estelle or Boa?
I'd take Boa.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think what I like about Estelle brings to the table is you would never pick her if it wasn't for her special skill. Yeah, if it wasn't for Balplex, you'd never pick her at all. But it's a really interesting special skill. I'd love to give her a crack or two and see how she goes. I would absolutely love that. That'd be brilliant.
It's a good way to start an argument too. Some people don't necessarily understand how the rule works or follow how the rule works, so it's very easy to mess it up.
Oh, well, we don't want arguments and debates. That's not what we're here for. Although, bit of banter, bit of argy-bargy, got no problem with that. So, yeah, I think I'd probably actually go... I'd probably go Estelle. I know, we're here to talk about Hypnogaze, but Estelle, like, she intrigues me. Yeah, that's it. She carries a slam team on her back.
She does. What's not to like about it?
I'm going to go Zolcath. Dan alluded to this earlier. It is true that I do love a bit of meta play. I do love forming team rosters that give me a slight edge and slight advantage where it's a tournament where I want to do well. And maybe that's an admission by myself that maybe I'm not as good a coach as some others around. But, I took Elven Union, which is the new Pro Elves, Elven Union to Bloodersloe Cup last year. Bloodersloe Cup, hot off the press, is going to change names for 2024. It is definitely, Bloodersloe Cup is definitely happening, but under a new name, new ownership.
Ooh.
New ownership.
New management.
New management, under new management. Well, I think the tournament organiser remains the same.
Same management, but officially different.
Yeah, there we go. So, it's like having the same head chef, but under new management, maybe. Anyway, Bloodersloe Cup last year, I managed to get third place, and that's because I had Zolcath on Elven Union. Now, I have to confess, I really did it because I wanted a star with strength to bring to the Elven Union, because... You know, we've all heard the horror tales, or if you've been around Blood Bowl tournaments long, you know the horror stories of Chaos and Chaos Dwarf teams running around with hack phlegm, and that's why the mega skills came out in the first place. But there's also the converse, and so I thought let's go an Elven team with some beef. And so that's why I picked Zolcath, was really for the strength. But he comes with this special skill that gives him Hypnogaze once per game. And I'm happy to report that I was successful in using Hypnotic Gaze in 4 out of the 5 games in Bloodersloe. And I didn't use it in the one game it's a non-event. So, 4 out of 5. I needed a 4+ for it to work, and it worked every single time. So Zolcath got it done. I got third place. I also got most touchdowns at that event, so I'm a very happy camper, and that definitely helped get me on the board in terms of racking up the points to be selected in the Queensland selection team. Yeah, that would be brilliant. So I'm looking forward to getting some more points on the board there, because let's not talk about the most recent tournament where I didn't get any points at all. All right, we've still got a couple of star players to consider, and in particular... one that got released pretty early on. In fact, the Forge World model came back out in, I believe, 2017. This is Eldril Sidewinder. Now, don't call him Edril. It's Eldril. Gotta get it right.
Eldrick Sidewinder, according to some of the old catalogues.
Yeah, fair enough. There are a few interesting pronunciation or spellings of various players, including Morgoth, Throg. Has
Morgoth and Throg.
Yeah. In fact, in second edition, at least in one place, he's Borg rather than Morg. So there we are. So Eldril, Sidewinder, he's a beast, and I think interestingly he occupies a similar space to one of the recent stars that's just come out, which is Jordell, Fresh Breeze. But Eldril does have Hypnotic Gaze, which you've got to think is of significant value for an elf team.
Yeah, absolutely. So for all the reasons we talked about with vampires, where mobility and Hypnotic Gaze makes your mobility more valuable, obviously on an elf team where everyone's got high agility instead of only the star players or the positional players, every elf on the team can make a good advantage out of having a hole in the defensive screens.
Yeah.
Eldril can not only step up and make the hole, he can also catch the ball and score the touchdown.
Yeah. So he's a decent catcher in his own right, but he is also good at making holes in the first place for everybody else to get through. I just want to encourage our listeners to think about Hypnotic Gaze. How do you leverage that? Is there a way you can have it on your team, either when you're playing Vamps? Do you want to consider Vamps for you? And if you're interested in playing Vamps, go for it. I love them personally, having played the old version of them. Dan, would you commend it to a coach?
If you can't roll 2+, don't play vampires.
Then Stewie's not going to play Vamps.
But it's similar to any elf team. If you can roll 2+ on a regular basis, you're going to have some fun. You can do all sorts of dodgy stuff. And you can make people cry when you score a touchdown from the full length of the field in one touch.
Is that your goal in Blood Bowl? Make other people cry?
Not usually.
Unless they're playing elves, in which case elf tiers are good.
I'm not a dwarf at heart, so I'm not as committed to that bit, but it's an option.
Yeah, and look, I'd have to say that I would say if you're new to Blood Bowl, if you're a relatively inexperienced coach, I probably wouldn't commend vampires to you.
Not straight away, but you can certainly, if it's something you're interested in, play a practice game or two with a more basic team, and then just jump in and have some fun. If you can imagine it being done on the field, a vampire team can do it.
Mm.
Yeah. One of the it's not a complaint that I have with GW with bringing out their new teams is they look amazing, and people that are new to it and say, yeah, okay, I've heard about this Blood Bowl, I want to play it, that look at things like the Halfling and love that team, or they look at things like the Vampires and love the look of that team, they've got to understand that they're not one of the easiest races to play with. But
I think to be fair to Games Workshop / Warhammer at this point, and particularly the rules committee that have designed 2020. I'm not a part of that rules committee. They have put tiers in officially, like the different complexities of teams for the very first time. This is the first edition where the complexity of playing the team is actually specifically stated, and so vampires are listed as a tier 2 team. So.
Oh, there's a topic for debate. Yeah.
We might make that a segment in its own right in a future episode.
That. Might have to do a tier 1. So, with all this stuff about who has it, who's got it, what does it do, how do you defend against it?
Good question. Yeah, look, I think it can be tough because you're going to lose tackle zones if they're successful in hypnogazing you, and hypnogaze is pretty easy. If it's a vampire player we're talking about here, it's a 2+.
2+.
So it's very, very likely. So you're going to need a 2 deep defense. You're going to need to have multiple players one behind the other to maintain any kind of screen.
Even a standard two-step screen isn't going to be as effective, because if you get hypnotic gazed on the front line, you can get blitzed through on the second line. They're still going to get all the way through. So you really want to have an overlap, not just a double stack of 2 players next to each other, but you'll need an overlap of several players around the position, just so there's not as big of a gap if one person gets taken out, or 1 or 2 people in a line.
So what would you recommend?
Just punch the vampires. It's that easy.
Well,
if the vampire can't get to you,
I think almost the opposite. Take out the thralls, and the vampires will do the work for you.
I'm 100% on your side. Take out the thralls and make them. Yeah. hopefully they bloodlust out. If they don't bloodlust, they're going to hypnogaze you anyway, but get rid of those thralls and...
They're the softer target, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. I think you want to be careful not to leave your ball carrier with only a very light screen around it, because that's absolutely asking to get hit. I think you're going to need to be smarter than that playing against vampires. I think you want to be making sure that you are outnumbering vampires. There's nothing worse than if you're outnumbered by vampires. I think you're done pretty much. I can't think of many examples where you're going to come back from that. Fortunately, vampires are almost designed that they are going to be down players because they like injuring their own players. And I think also you want to make sure that you've got the ability to keep it running, even if the ball spills. You know, you've got to be able to contest that ball, and that's harder said than done because vampires are strength 4, and if they'll get the ball loose, they'll pick it up, and then good luck getting it back off them.
Yeah, well, I'm busy taking notes over here because I know you're taking vampires to fumble in the jungle. I'm taking slan, so I've been taking notes. So
that'll be a contest because both teams have the ability to dash through your cage like it doesn't exist. Yeah.
There's definitely a something to be said for staying away from the vampires, because most of the vampires are a bit slower than the fast ball carriers for a lot of teams. So gutter runners, war dancers, catchers for most teams have movement 8. The vampire runners have movement 8, but a standard vampire only has movement 6. So it's still relatively easy. If the vampires are bogged down in the centre field, it's relatively easy to stay out of their way and just stay away from them.
Yeah, and as I say, I like the idea of using multiple depth of screens. Like you say, it is possible to get through, but only with one blitz, right? Like the rest of the team's still going to be stuck there. Yes, they're very dodgy, though, so, you know, they can dodge on a 2+, and it's reasonably common for vampire coaches to get dodge at some point, particularly if it's a league. So, you do want to be careful, and I think your point's valid. And the players, the vampire runners that have movement 8 are only strength 3, so they're not as fierce and intimidating as your strength 4. That's a huge difference, strength 3, strength 4.
Yeah, that was a big change when they came out with the rule set this time, with dropping down to strength 3 on a vampire. Traditionally, they've always been strength 4, so yeah, that extra movement, which means they're probably going to be using that movement to score or to get in position rather than to get ball carriers.
Yeah. Here's a little anecdote. Did you know that it wasn't originally going to be the stats we actually got? And we know that for a fact. And because an error slipped through, and you see it in the FAQ that just came out recently, that the team of legend for the vampires in the spike has their runners with the original stat line they were proposing. So they've had to FAQ the stat line of those vampire runners. So if you want to know what vampire runners were going to be and the rules committee tweaked, you can go and have a look yourself.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Let's. I think. Is there anything else we want to say about defending against it? Sounds like we're saying it's not easy.
Yeah. Take out the coach in the car park before the about my
Put some voodoo on their dice so they just roll once.
Yeah, that's so helpful, guys. It's just I don't recommend doing either of those things. All right, well, I think we'll wrap up this first segment. We are done. We're going to move on. We're going to talk briefly about Down Under World Denizens. So this podcast deliberately has a bit of a play on words going on. You've probably already picked up one that there is this team that was, up until a couple of weeks ago, the top of the performance rankings. The Underworld Denizens is a Blood Bowl team in its own right. It is this weird hybrid mix of goblins and Skaven and Snotlings.
Never forget the Snotlings.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Don't forget the Snotlings. And the Snotlings have not been deleted, but there has been a significant change. You would have had to have been living under a rock or out of internet for several weeks. So maybe you've been out in the desert somewhere where there's been no mobile phone reception, or just on the way home from Agnes Waters. And you might have noticed that, so you might have been out of the loop, but actually swarming has been taken off the Underworld. And we will talk a little bit about what that means, but that means, I think, that Underworld are going to suddenly lose the spotlight that they've had on them for a long time, and all the power coaches that pick the beardiest team and cheesiest team. And I did just confess earlier in the podcast I may be a little bit that way. And I must admit that actually for the next tournament I'm planning to go to, I did strongly consider an Underworld roster. But they've come off the limelight, and I think so. We want to make sure that Underworld Denizens remain with some love. We love underdogs. It's one of the things that make Australian teams, so lovable. Is we love an underdog story. It's part of our Aussie convict heritage. I would argue is we love being down on authority and down on the ruling class. And we want to make sure that our Underworld team go back to where they belong as an underdog, and we want to support them from there. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely.
And I think out of the three of us, I'm the troll with really stupid. Just you don't want to see me with projectile vomit. All right. So, so why another podcast? There's lots of good podcasts out there. Millsy, you're a bit of a podcast listener. Nate, give us a shout out to a podcast that you would recommend our listeners to listen to as well as us.
As well as us. There's so many. Both Down, 3 Die Block, Bonehead, Pauteroa. There's just so many of them, and they each have their own niche.
Have you heard of Unchanneled Fury? Speaking of Dan's special trait,
that's a podcast.
Yeah, there is a podcast, Unchanneled Fury. I'm interested to hear. Apparently, the banter on that's pretty good. They're based in London, so I'm keen to hear them.
Oh, okay. And one I've just recently started listening to is Players to Nuffle. That was on the recommendation of Babs. So, driving up here this morning, I was listening to episode 2 or 3, I believe, of that, and it was all slan. So, I was loving my drive this morning. But every podcast has its own niche. Some of them both now talk about the fluff. Zlerpcast back in the day talked about tournaments and so on. So, what do we bring? Probably nothing. It's worthwhile listening to 3 Aussie blokes and just hear what they have to say.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think being the lads is actually one of the things we do bring to the table. In fact, we want to specifically make sure we talk about being Aussie as one of the things that this podcast focused on. And of course, that leads us to our spheres of focus. The first sphere of focus is that we all reside in what I call the broader central Queensland region, and Millsy's a bit of a stretch because he technically lives in Wide Bay, which is another region of Queensland, but we're just calling you in just because we can. And we've never been big on boundaries anyway, unless it comes to rabbit-proof fences. Yeah. So, our league is probably one of the world's biggest leagues in terms of, not numbers, but in terms of geographical area. Location. Yeah, so we are called now, we used to be called the Rocky Stone Blood Bowl League, which stood for Rockhampton and Gladstone, but then Millsy joined us, so we had to expand the name somehow. And so now we're Gerbil. And don't get the wrong idea with gerbil. It is a play on words to mean some small furry animal, and we couldn't call it chinchilla because that's a place in Queensland. So what we did was we went with gerbil, and it stands for Gladstone, Emerald, Rockhampton, Bundaberg Blood Bowl League. So, and
putting that into perspective, so Bundaberg to here in Gladstone is a 2.5 hour drive. It's another hour drive north to Rockhampton, and then it's another 2.5 hour drive west out to Emerald. So that's how big our league encompasses.
Yeah, so to actually drive from Emerald to Bundy, I don't know, but to Gladstone, yeah, Gladstone is 4. So Gladstone to Emerald is 4 hours, and that's without a stop.
Yeah.
And when we say 4 hours, like that's not driving on country London roads. That's or country England roads, I should say.
No, that's 100 k's an hour, 60 mile for those people in America.
Yeah,
60 mile an hour. So 100 k's an hour, predominantly through the countryside. It's a fair old way.
Yeah. That's it. And obviously we've got roadkill on the side of the road, and we got B double trucks, which are bigger than semis that drive around because it's a mining community predominantly. Yeah. So. Some of our coaches actually do what's called FIFO, fly in, fly out, or DIDO, drive in, drive out. So that we have a very relaxed schedule, probably one of the world's most relaxed schedules. We play one game a month, And if you don't make it for a particular month, who cares? You catch up when you can, and quite a few of our coaches do. Oh, actually, it was lovely. Jay Smith just messaged me the other day this week saying, oh, yeah, I could be convinced to play a couple of games. He set out this season because his life's been busy, but he's just decided he can give up every second Sunday to get back in. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we don't care. We're in round 6, which is the final round of our league, and we'll talk about our local league rules another podcast. But the first thing we want to talk about is the tyranny of distance in central Queensland. Like, it's no small deal that we're all in the same man cave today. How long did it take you to get here, Millsy?
2.5 hours this morning.
There we go.
Yeah.
And hence the podcasts.
Sorry?
Hence the podcasts on the car this morning.
Yeah, well, I listen to podcasts whenever I'm in the car. But yeah, and when I play in the league, in the Gerbil League, I drive 2.5 hours, play for 2.5 hours, and then drive 2.5 hours home. So it's a big commitment, but
And Stewie, who I've mentioned, who's our commissioner here in Gladstone, our local commissioner in Gladstone, he may join us later in the episode. But Stewie said that he keeps saying, "Oh yeah, we got to go down to Bundaberg and play some games down Bundy." I don't think we ever made it down to Bundy to play any games. It's always you travelling.
Stewie has come once. He stayed with his uncle, I think, or he's got some family down there. So he did come down one day.
We made it down there one day last season for a practice game for a tournament that was coming up.
It's Grimm's, that's our local gaming store there in Bundaberg. We came down there. I do now have a new league in Bundaberg, still in part of Central Queensland, as we're going to call it. It's the Gobble League, Grimm's Open Blood Bowl League. And we started off with, there's 12 players in our league this season playing, so it was good to finally get something going down there. I still travel up here.
Now, Millsy, I have to ask, are you feeling a bit sore about talking about Gobble right now? Because I know the news.
I may have just lost my semi-final. There was a bit of to-ing throwing on that. I was playing Goblins against Skaven. First half, I was 1-0 up with 5 casualties to nothing. And then I went down 3-2.
Yeah. And look, I have to say, though, that not as commiseration to you, but isn't, as a tournament organiser, a commissioner, a league commissioner, isn't that what you want?
Oh, it was fantastic to see the level of play these guys have now. And I was playing Shorty, or Jamie Hall. Shout out to him. So, and I mentioned at the end of the game, said if that game had been round 1 this year, or this season, would you have performed so well? And he had to admit, no way. So, like, his level of picking up, just for me, like, I took the worst team possible and played my backside off and showed them what was possible, and they've all picked up on that to a point where I'm actually happy to lose and not win my own league.
Yeah, I love that idea, and that's become a bit of a theme that we've had running here, is we want to be very intentional that the more experienced coaches don't dominate the league every season. So we deliberately take a pretty challenging team to play. And that was the advice that you adopted and picked Goblins. And then I remember you saying, why the hell have I not played Goblins before? Now these are fantastic.
I was hooked after my first Goblin game, and I'd never... I don't want to play stunty teams. Why would you want to do that? No way, no. And just the shenanigans.
You play for sheep stations. Is that what you're saying, Millsy?
Whilst I always try and win every game I'm in, Blood Bowl is about the fun and just the level of fun playing Goblins, because I put my mind as I'm no longer a human coach. I am a Goblin. What would a Goblin do in this situation? And if you go
so hang on. You're a goblin in Gobble.
Yes, I'm a goblin in Gobble. If you go into it with that mindset, stunties are amazing. I'm sure the other stunty teams are as well.
Absolutely, I love playing my snotlings. I really want to bust them out again at another event or another league season coming up. Fun comment from Zach Gibbs down in Ipswich. He told me I play my orc team like I'm a goblin coach. So I want to play some goblins and play them like I'm an orc coach, and we'll see where that comes out in between.
Yeah, but that may not necessarily be a good thing. I mean, orcs bash first and ask questions later.
I mean, people are more afraid of my snotlings punching them than my orcs because my orcs fall over more often.
It's possibly true. Oh, dear. But, I've heard that your troll is a really fun guy.
Just one of them. The other one's pretty toxic.
Nice. Yeah, no. And look, although, it's a bit ironic that you're saying that you love stunties because you weren't really loving it when I played your vampires with my halflings.
I love to play as them, not against them. These are two different things.
And I have to confess, really, the only thing that carried that game, and you did end up beating me 1-0, was let's just say that Deeproot made a special appearance.
He made an impact.
That's putting it mildly. Yes. So that's our local league, and we're in round 6. We're not going to go blow to blow with what the league's doing. We think that's probably not what you're here to listen to. No. And we think there's probably more interesting things to discuss. But we do want to tell you that's our context. We do a lot of driving. We see a lot of roadkill. We watch for birds of prey as we drive, thanks to Dan, who that has this car game that you play and you look out for 3 things.
Yeah, so long road trips, depending on how often you make them, can get boring and monotonous. So I like to have a little mini game of counting road kills, counting road works, and counting birds of prey that might be circling in the sky.
Yes.
So
I think it's a pretty Aussie-specific kind of card game.
I mean, I've played Spotto before, but that's taken it to a whole new level.
So the count for roadkill from Rocky to Gladstone in an hour and a half this morning was about 7.
Yeah.
2 of them were in the same spot. Looked like it had been one under each wheel of a four-wheel drive on the way past.
That's not what we want.
There were 0 roadworks, which is actually good because there's not a lot of it happening in the local area at the moment. But sadly, there were no birds of prey because it's overcast and they're probably hiding in a tree somewhere.
Yeah, well, I drive to Agnes Waters every day, which is an hour and a half one way, hence my fascination with podcasts at the moment. And I travel either end of the day, like I travel at dawn and I travel at dusk, and so I get to see quite a lot of birds of prey, which is really cool. Yeah, including wedge-tails, which is really cool.
There you go. You don't forget we are in Australia. Not all of our birds of prey are in the air. We do have a couple of rather large ones.
Mind you, cassowaries kind of don't really kick in until you get a bit further north than here.
I do regularly see emus down in Bundy on one of the farms and drive past there, so they're there.
Yeah.
Also, for context of travel, Rockhampton to Brisbane, Brisbane being the state capital of Queensland in the southeast corner, is about 7 hours approximately, depending on traffic. So our local league spans anywhere up to half of that distance.
Oh, I'm pretty confident we could fit some European countries inside our local league catchment.
Absolutely.
And so the next step, as Dan's kind of segued to, is our next topic that we want our podcast to focus on is what is going on with Blood Bowl in Queensland. We're going to have some guest commentators come on and chat about what's going on in Queensland a little down the track. We've already alluded to the fact that there's a ranking system for a selection team. What for? You'll have to wait if you don't already know the answer to that question and find out. Yeah. But, and hence the road trips. So all 3 of us are very committed to supporting Blood Bowl in Queensland. We've been passionate about it, and we've been delighted to see a bunch of tournaments either reappear or appear in the Blood Bowl tournament circuit here in Queensland. And we've got a couple coming up, which we'll mention shortly. But, the road trip is a key part of that for us in CQ. And we road trip both directions, south and, for the first time, north, coming up. So, Queensland. And that road trip is actually a key part of what we love. We love the chat and just catching up as we road trip it. And that's what we try to do. Saves on costs. It's not always possible. Some of us, Stewie's at least flown to a couple of tournaments. So flight is an option.
Stewie's going to catch a train to the Cairns tournament because Bonza went belly up.
Yeah, that's a tragedy, yes. Yeah. Yep, no, that is true. So, in case you don't know, Bonza was a regional airline that launched 14 months ago or 16 months ago. And we were delighted. We loved it. They were pitching them at low cost airfares, and they were a bit unique, and they tried to fly routes that weren't currently being serviced. So from Gladstone anyway, there was a flight once a week down to Melbourne. Well, there's no direct flights from Gladstone to anywhere other than Brisbane. That's not quite true, but unless you work in one of the mines, that's the only flight you've got. You can fly anywhere you want from Gladstone as long as it's Brisbane. So Bonza specialised in flights, to places that weren't currently serviced. So Rockhampton to Cairns was one of those flights, and at least three of us, including Dan here, bought tickets for Fumble in the Jungle, the Cairns tournament, and then the airline collapsed. So, we're actually going to talk about Fumble in the Jungle in a moment, and I just really want to say, if there's any chance any of you listeners are potentially wanting to go to Cairns, it's a fantastic place to go. Absolutely a tourist destination in its own right. You could combine seeing the sights of tropical North Queensland and a Blood Bowl tournament. What's not to love about that? But we will be planning to get there. I'm going to road trip it with the family because it is such a tourist destination. So I'm bringing the family. We're going to take our time and drive up there. What about you, Millsy?
I'm doing the same. So day one of our school holidays, I'm driving from here to Townsville, which is an all-day drive.
That's still a big day.
That's still a big day. My daughter is in Townsville. She's playing in the Quizzen, or the Queensland Secondary Schools Netball Carnival. This year it's being held in Townsville, so that goes over a week. So I'm going to stay and watch her play games all week, and then after her last game on Friday, I'm going to hightail it and drive another 3.5, 4 hours up to Cairns for the tournament overnight, and then we'll just slowly road trip back after the tournament.
Yeah, what about you, Dan? Have you figured out what you're doing since Bonza went belly up?
Well, at this stage, I'll be probably expanding my my trip to be a leisurely train ride from Rockhampton up to Cairns. It leaves on the Wednesday night and arrives Thursday afternoon. So that's definitely the option there. I believe Stewie's catching the train north, but then flying home. So he only has to pay for one of them because he gets free train trips himself.
Perks of working with the railway. Then third sphere is Australia-wide Blood Bowl. We want to talk about all things Blood Bowl in Australia. We want to focus on different areas of Australia in upcoming podcasts. We'd love to focus kind of a state or a city at a time, talk about what's going on with Blood Bowl, bring guest commentators on to the podcast to chat about that. We love travelling to Blood Bowl, and while our focus has predominantly been Queensland, I've used to, before I came to Queensland, I used to live in New South Wales, and so I know a lot of the guys in the New South Wales Blood Bowl scene, and so Eucalyptus Bowl is a big tournament in New South Wales.
It's a world major.
It is one of the 5 world majors, which we can talk about what that means maybe next podcast, but I've attended 13 of those. I've got 2 to go before I get my patch for 15. And unfortunately, I can't make it this year. Unfortunately, the school holidays don't line up. So, both Millsy and I have chatted about it, and neither of us are going to this particular one.
No, unless those lotto winnings come up. Well, we've coming up, we've got Cane Toad Cup, and then 2 weeks later we've got Fumble in the Jungle. Fumble in the Jungle, and then 2 weeks later would be Uke Bowl, which is outside of our school holiday time. So Babs and I being teachers, we don't get a lot of time off otherwise. So this year Uke Bowl's going to be off for me as well. Yeah.
So anyway, and another one that a bunch of Queenslanders go to every year is the Big V, and that's in Melbourne. And
Big V.
It's been running for quite some time. I was looking at the swag from Big V 2017. I don't know whether that was the first. We'd probably need to double check with that.
It'll be close around that time.
Yeah, and then there was Little V that ran originally at a separate time, at a separate date. But now there's Cheeky V as well. Yes. Cheeky V being a 7s variant, Mr. Variant King over here. So I think we'd love to get to Big V at some point. But
that would be, and I believe this year they've opened it up to 200 coaches.
Yeah.
It's got to be huge.
Yeah. Well, it broke records 2 years in a row because prior to Big V 2022, the biggest Blood Bowl tournament in Australia was 74, 76 coaches.
Yeah.
And so Big V in 2022 was 89-ish. And then last year, 143, I think, from memory. And so, yeah, it's definitely Australia's biggest Blood Bowl tournament. It's had internationals come over because it's hit that critical mass where it's like a World Cup now. It's and if you don't know what a World Cup is, stay tuned. But it draws its own crowd because of the sheer number of coaches at it.
Yeah, which basically brings us on to the next level of we've gone Central Queensland, we've gone Queensland, Australia now. Let's go global. Let's go international.
Yeah, and I love a good play on words. I love my dad jokes.
We are the Down Under World Denizens.
Yes.
I had to put the emphasis on the world there.
Yeah. So we're from Down Under, but we are world denizens.
World denizens.
Yeah, that's it. So there's the play on words there. That yes, we are from Down Under, but we are world denizens. We are involved in Blood Bowl globally, or the global thing that is Blood Bowl, and that includes chatting about what's going on with Blood Bowl globally, both through the NAF and what's happening with Games Workshop / Warhammer. Which is great. And that brings us to chatting briefly about what's the latest goss. We don't want to go blow by blow through the FAQ and errata, but there are a couple of changes that are probably worthwhile thinking about. What does that mean for Blood Bowl, right? Like, one of which, there was a couple of mentions of how Bloodlust works in the FAQ.
Yep.
And in particular, talking about what about foul appearance working with Bloodlust? I thought that was an interesting combo I hadn't considered. Also, of course, they wanted to clarify a few things with the gnomes, which, of course, if you want to know what the gnomes are and what the gnomes do, listen to any other podcast other than this one, because it's been the talk of the town, that's for sure. But what do we think with this latest FAQ? Right? Swarming off Underworld, and there's been another couple of significant changes. One is passing skills back on goblins.
Yeah.
The Goblin Bomber, specifically.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. And another one is Guard does no longer apply for assists with fouls.
That's going to be the big one for a number of teams. Underworld would definitely have been one of them. Snotlings and Goblins would enjoy it as well. Potentially impacting the list I'm taking to Cane Toad Cup as well. Guard, in the rulebook, assists for both blocks and fouls. In the latest errata, it no longer works on fouls and it only works on blocks.
Yeah.
So if you have Guard on your trolls, like I tend to because it's enjoyable, who doesn't love making their Snotlings get one-die blocks against people? You can no longer block people into the ground and then foul them with an assist from your troll, unless there's no one else still
so here's my question for us as commentators. What do we think is the impact going to be of that change? Like, what do we think that's going to do to team performance? So I would have thought traditionally that, your guard-heavy teams are going to be the ones that most significantly impacted. So, your dwarves, right? They love to stack guard. That's why one of the most common tournament rules you have is you can only take X number of each type of skill. So you can't take 8 guarders. But, did they foul that much?
Outside of the Death Roller, I don't tend to see dwarf players making a lot of fouls. And the Death Roller's got +2 on Dirty Player anyway, so it doesn't need that many assists from guard in the first place.
So is it a case of Games Workshop have given and taken? They gave Goblin Bombers passing skills and took away the fouling meta.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change the amount of fouls. Goblins will still foul when there's a guy down. They'll still do that.
Well, if they want any chance to win, that's what they have to do, and that's what they're designed to do.
It's going to change the amount, but just it might have an impact on how many they KO or stun. Or
do we think it's going to have an impact on big guys with guard? Do you think does it impact the gnomes who have just been released? I mean, I already thought, look, those Beastmasters look pretty cool with guard. Give the trees guard. That's a lot of guard.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely.
And gnomes are the fighty stunties. That's what people are saying. So
to quote Bonehead Podcast, they're funty. Fighty and stunty.
Which I just think is fun team, right? Like, I'm keen. I want to play them next season. Do you think it's going to...
I don't know that it'll necessarily change people's game plans. It'll just make it marginally less effective. So teams that are going to foul, they're going to foul anyway. teams that don't foul, they don't care. It just means you might get 1 or 2 points less of an assist where you're in the middle of a big ruck.
So here's my red hot take. I actually think it's going to make Black Hawks worse. Black Hawks are already not a high-performing team, but I think because guard is a pretty common take on Black Hawks. They've already got brawler, right? So the need for block is reduced a little. Not a lot, but a little.
Yep.
So they're not going to take block. So it's not that uncommon to see a fair few guard Black Hawks doing the rounds. And, of course, they are a fouling team. That's what their Goblin Bruisers are for, right? So I think, unfortunately, while I don't disagree with the decision, I think it's actually going to see a drop in the rankings of how competitive our Black Hawk brothers are going to be. Not to say that the coaches that are really successful with Black Hawks aren't going to continue to be successful, but they're the exception rather than the rule. Like one of our local Queensland coaches, Lee Hobbins, aka Crazy Hobgoblin, he loves his Black Hawks with no re-rolls. I don't know how he does it, but he does very well with them.
And he's got most casualties at a number of tournaments.
Yeah.
Black Hawks with no re-rolls.
Yeah.
Like, you're the man, Lee.
I'm just not a team no re-rolls. Sorry.
You'll notice it's also most casualties, not most touchdowns.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think the only way a Black Hawk team would ever get much touchdowns would be designing some kind of beast of a throw teammate, but I don't know that that's the right team for that build. All right. So, what else? What else do we think the FAQ is going to do to the meta? We've already touched on it.
The Underworld team not having that swarming. It's strange. When I played Underworld, I only ever had 2 snotlings on my team. Half of the time I forgot to swarm anyway, because I just play it with that gutter runner. He's going to do everything. But yeah, in tournaments now, that's the thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to take snotlings. I'm going to take Underworld. I'm going to have all these snotlings. I'm going to have a star player. I think they're still going to have the star player. They're just not going to get all that swarming. Your mileage may vary. I didn't use swarming that much, but I played against Dan, who just killed me with it. So, it comes down to a play style. If that's your play style, then it's going to work really well for you.
I do think swarming is huge. I don't want to understate the value of swarming. Having those extra couple of bodies on the pitch makes a massive difference. And that's one of the big things about Blood Bowl as a game, is weight of numbers is a massive impact.
The other thing that swarming gives you as a snotling player is a lot of reliability on ball control. Because swarming happens while the ball's in the air, but you know where it's going to land, you can very easily put a swarming snotling under the ball to catch it.
Ooh.
So you can quite aggressively deploy your 11-man setup on the line, and then as long as the ball doesn't go into the side zones, you can have someone on the ball regardless.
Nice. So it's free on the ball.
Just about.
I like it. Clever. Look, here's my question for you, Dan. You're our resident snotling guru. Do you think some of these power coaches that have fallen in love with having weight of numbers on the pitch are going to move from playing Underworld to playing snotlings?
Probably not. Snotlings don't have the same reliability in scoring like having a gutter runner on your Underworld team does. They don't have the same beef that having 3 clan rats and a blitzer is going to give you to your front line. Snotlings are still very definitely a novelty team as far as what people can do and what people can get out of it. They're definitely not as reliable as a lot of other teams out there, but they can definitely have a lot of fun. They can do a lot of things very well, and if you want to abuse star players, they're definitely the most economical vehicle to do it in.
Yeah. I guess that's fair. Although that said, I do really love the idea of the crazy secret stuff. Secret weapons and pump wagons and fungus flingers and a lot of shenanigans. I've heard it said that snotling teams out goblin a goblin team just in terms of that crazy stuff they do. Look,
you have to though. Because
here's my unscripted hot take. I haven't got this question in our agenda. What team do you think the power players are going to go to now that Underworld's off the boil? I'm not saying they're completely out of being a tier 1 team, particularly if you're thinking only 3 different tiers. We might cover that in a future pod. But yeah, they're definitely, let's say they're still tier 1, because if they're allowed star players, I think they're still going to be up there. Yeah, they got cheap players, so that means you can get a good star or 2 in your roster if you're allowed them. So what team do you think they're going to flock to? Are we going to see them all go to Wood Elves? Oh, Wood Elves.
Oh, Wood Elves would be good, but Vampires is the next. We discussed at the start of the podcast that they're almost broken in what they can do to somebody else.
You don't think you're overplaying our influence here? Everybody's going to listen and go, "Oh, hang on a minute."
Well, hopefully, I don't want to go and face all these vampires, but if you're someone who only plays Underworld because it's the number 1 team and so on, if that's you, then you might be going to Vampires to get that advantage. That's not me. I would play Snotlings, I would play Vampires, I would play everything. But if your sole reason for taking Underworld is because it's the best team out there, then the new hottest one on the block, I think, is Vampires.
Yeah, right.
There's certainly a lot of room for people to go back to playing Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves have been a very very popular pick for a long time. I would like to see more Wood Elves out and about there, because they're a very niche team in our regional meta. Dimitri does very well with them, but he's one of very few players that actually take them to events.
Yeah.
So if players that are moving away from Underworld Denizens decide to pick up Wood Elves, that would be very, very fun for me to see out and about. Any elf team's certainly going to give you a lot of reliability, which is what the Underworld definitely served up, as well as having the different options. But Chaos Dwarves and Dwarves are perennial favourites for a lot of players, and they're never going away.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say I would predict a bunch of the power players will go to Lizardmen, because you're going to... I'm thinking if you already have a play style that's good with Underworld, like if you know how to play Underworld well, what team has a similar play style, at least to some degree, as Underworld? Well, Lizardmen fit that niche. They got one big guy, just like the Underworld. They've got movement 8, strength 2 guys running around, just like Underworld. So yeah, they've got your goblin-y, gutter runner-y kind of players in your skinks. So I think the play style is not completely dissimilar. That said, the Saurus...
You've got players to hit with and players to run with.
Yeah, your Saurus is a bit of the outlier there, because you need to learn how to use those. They can get bogged down if you're not careful. But there you go. There's my take. I think they'll go. And interestingly, I've had a chat with somebody else about this. Here in Australia, we don't seem to see very many Lizardmen coaches at tournaments. I don't know why that is, but apparently globally that is a thing. Lots of coaches take Lizardmen and win.
Apparently there's one coach at this table taking to the Great Barrier Biff.
Right, right, okay.
Hot off the presses.
Oh, there you go. That's news to me, and I'm the tournament organiser for Great Barrier Biff too. All right, I think we might move on. And we've already covered this in a little bit of detail, but upcoming events. What things are going on, and we're just going to focus on Queensland for this particular pod because time is ticking. So, June 15th, 16th, we have Cane Toad Cup happening. Millsy, tell us about Cane Toad Cup. You know the history. You were there.
I was at the original Cane Toad Cup. That was back in 2012, I believe. 2012. Yeah, it was amazing. It was my first big tournament in Queensland, and it was in 2013 as well. I moved away after that, and I'm not sure if it actually ran.
So you didn't go to Cane Toad Cup 2014?
No.
It did run. It ran for 3 years.
Yeah, there we go. So I did the first two, and then when Chris Stratford said it's coming back, it was like, okay, take my money.
I have to say, I'm surprised at the Regos. They're over 40 at the moment. They've got over 40 people coming.
Have you seen the amount of swag we're getting?
Oh, I know.
And it is not just the amount of swag, it's quality.
And we knew that was going to be the case, right? Like Chris, in case you didn't know, the Ausbowl State Champions were held last year in Brisbane, and Chris Stratford put his hand up to get the Ausbowl State Champs happening, and he did a fantastic, phenomenal job, and we already knew the quality of the things he would produce for the tournament was going to be up there, as evidenced at Ausbowl State Champs. So I knew the swag was going to be good, but I think he's outdone expectations.
Yeah, definitely. And even the first one was we got so much swag from that. I've got a Scotch glass, which is actually my water pot from my painting now. We got dice, we got counters, we got back then, Chris actually sculpted a little cane toad, which we used for a zap spell. This was pre anyone having miniatures at tournaments. Well, other tournaments had it, but not like every tournament you go to now. There's a 3D printed. Chris actually sculpted this himself and poured resin into a little mould and made them all.
There you go. I did not know that.
There you go. Yeah, I've probably got them in my bag here. We can have a look at during the break.
Yeah, so Cane Toad Cup ran 2012, 2013, 2014, had 10 years off, and it is back, baby.
It's back.
Yeah, and I'm delighted to say what I really love about Cane Toad Cup is Chris Stratford is very highly regarded nationally. He's one of the tournament players that travels interstate. He's been in several of the Ausbowl State Championships over the years, representing Queensland. And so we're actually, Dan and I and Millsy are all sharing a shared house accommodation with Danny Pickler, Piano Dan, coming from Radelaide. So that's going to be awesome. Going to be good to catch up with him. I haven't seen him for years. Back when I was running CanCon is probably the last time I remember Danny. So that'll be fantastic. Yeah. So Cane Toad Cup coming up 15th, 16th of June. At the time this podcast comes out, hopefully it's not too late to still register if you're interested in making the trip, because Brisbane has one of the biggest airports in the country, and you can pretty much get a direct flight from anywhere to Brisbane. So it's not that difficult to get to if you're outside and thinking about coming to Cane Toad Cup. I would highly commend it. Chris Stratford does a good job. We run 5-game tournaments in Queensland. There's reasons for that, like the fact that we road trip, and so getting back on a Sunday arvo for work on a Monday. Yeah, and so just want to really encourage you to come for a 5-game tournament. I know Chris does a great job. I'm really looking forward to it, and over 40 coaches. That will put it as the biggest or the second biggest tournament that I believe Queensland's ever seen, behind Sunny Coast Slam this year. So awesome. The other tournament we've already mentioned is Fumble in the Jungle. I think we've covered that pretty well, but in case you don't know about it, it is the 29th and 30th of June at the Wicked Goblin, which is a friendly local gaming supplier in Cairns. They have recently changed venue, so if you knew the Wicked Goblin and knew where it was in the CBD, it's not at that location anymore. They have changed venue. But apparently the new venue is even better. So I'm really wanting. The main reason I want to get up there is just to encourage the Cairns boys. They've come to a few tournaments. We love them. We think they're fantastic. Shout out to those guys organising, Gerard and Luke and Chris. You guys are legends. And we're all pumped for that. It's a different rule set to Cane Toad Cup. Yeah, so do get your head around it. Both those tournaments are going to be on Tour Play. Tour play? How do you say that?
Tour play.
Tour play. Go on a tour. I don't know.
And for those people listening from overseas planning a trip to Australia to go to that, I'll tell you about my very first time in Cairns. It was in the middle of June, which here in the Southern Hemisphere is winter. And I remember sitting on the esplanade in the pools, looking up, and the temperature was 31 degrees.
In the middle of winter. Well, dry season up there, right?
Dry season, yeah.
It is the right time of year to actually come to Cairns. Is that April to September, October is the best time. You don't want to be up that part of the world the other half of the year when it's the wet season, let me tell you. We love it. My wife and I went there for our honeymoon up to Port Douglas and Cairns. So, this will be a bit of a...
completely different experience.
Well, it'll... we're bringing our daughter this time, I guess. But, we love it. We love it. All right. Now, last thing. If you're thinking, this tournament thing, I don't know much about Blood Bowl and tournaments. If that's you, or you kind of know about tournaments near you and you're maybe thinking about going to tournaments somewhere else, where could you go to look? Where could you find out about Blood Bowl tournaments?
There's a number of different Facebook groups, and there's a Discord channel as well for Ausbowl. Ausbowl being the Australian National Championships. So you can find Ausbowl very easily on Facebook. You can find Ausbowl on Discord. Every tournament in Australia will put their dates and advertisements coming up on those channels. And as one thing we've been doing in Queensland is keeping track of our tournament results for our qualifications for the Ausbowl State Championships, so that Queensland can send a good team this year.
I take offence to that, Dan.
Yeah, that's right.
I was on that tournament that won the winners' spoon.
Hey, you could be again.
I'm a turncoat, right? I've actually been potentially, at least, on 3 different states and territories teams. I was invited but declined to represent New South Wales once. I was captain of the ACT team in the 2023, which was literally a mishmash of whoever we could kind of rally. And
I believe most of those were from Queensland.
Shh. That's a well-kept secret until now. And also, I was very pleased that we didn't come wooden spooners. But the fact that the like of you and Dave Lieber ended up wooden spooners just tells you the quality of coaches at that event. Far out. I was blown away.
It was massive. And I said to people, and they've gone, "Oh, how'd you go?" And I said, "Look, I got 1 draw." And they're, "Oh, wow, you must be terrible." It's like, no. You've got to look at the complexity. So here in my local league, if I make a mistake, majority of the players aren't going to notice it. You go to some tournaments here in Queensland and so on, I make a mistake, most people will notice it. You go to Ausbowl, you make a mistake, not only will they notice it, they will punish you.
That's exactly right.
Well, it might not even seem like a mistake originally, and then they punish you anyway.
Yes, it might not have been a mistake. It might have been a perfectly good play in any other situation.
Yeah. Let's just say that the NAF ranks your coach, like you as a coach, by race, and the race that I am lowest ranked for is the team I took to Ausbowl State Champs, because I did get punished a lot.
I believe your ranking went down from that, did it?
Yes, a lot. All right, yeah. So, do you want to shout out to the Discord? I'm not a big Discorder, but their Ausbowl Discord is good.
Facebook is probably the best place to find information. It's probably how you found this podcast in the first place.
I hope so.
Yeah, so Facebook, and then a lot of those Facebook groups will have messenger groups that you can talk in between there, but probably finding the information is the easiest. Is just jump onto Facebook and go from there. If you know the name of the tournament, or if you know the name of the podcast, or whatever you're trying to find, type it into Facebook, it'll come up.
Yeah, look, the Ausbowl group's a great place to start. There is also a Queensland-specific Facebook group called the Queensland Blood Bowl Tournament and Interleagues group. Basically discussing games in between different leagues and tournaments around Queensland. So, commend that to you if you're interested in that. You don't actually have to live here to be a part of that group. We're not that particular. All right, I think we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment.
Okay, I'm going to take a heroic leap here and take over for our next segment. This is Deadset Legends. Here in Australia, we've got a lot of Deadset Legends. And in the Blood Bowl world, we used to have a lot of Deadset Legends.
Well, are they dead because they're not around anymore?
Well, I don't know. Let's just say they are legends. I'm not sure whether they're dead, but they are dead set. So this is going to be a semi-ongoing segment here where we talk about bringing back one of those golden era star players that were around in the original Blood Bowl Star Players book, or even back in Blood Bowl magazine, which was LRB.
Well, Blood Bowl magazine was pre-LRB days, but then also LRB stars. There's a whole bunch of 5th edition stars
that have not come back. Yes, you're speaking to a slam player here. I'm well aware of a complete lack of frogs. But in this episode, we're going to look at Hoshi Komi. If we go to the Blood Bowl Star Players book from 1989, Hoshi Komi was player number 2 for the Cleveland Crescents. He was a human catcher. He had an MA of 4, an SP of a sprint skill SP of +4, which basically meant he could move 8. Strength of 2, agility of 4, which would nowadays be 2+. A TS, which is a throwing skill, he had 0. The CL or cool +1, and an AV of 8. He came with block level 2, dodge level 4, Itchy Feet, Jump Up, Leap level 4, hence the reason why I like this guy, and Mighty Blow level 2.
He doesn't have heroic leap though. Just regular leap.
Hoshi Komi was heroic.
And we've done our homework for this podcast, and hopefully it shows, but I read up that leap in 2nd edition Blood Bowl was like jumping over prone players, that it actually wasn't for jumping over players that were standing, it was only for prone players. So he's a good leaper, like he's got the very highest level of leap in 2nd ed, but it's for jumping over prone players. Now, just before we dive in and start micro-analysing Hoshi Komi, he is clearly designed to be a Nippon player, a player from the region of Nippon in the old world, which is meant to hearken to Japanese culture, I think is fair to say. Not necessarily meant to directly map in the same way that the Norse team don't directly map to Scandinavia today, nor are they meant to. So don't draw that parallel. We're not trying to be making any kind of commentary on that particular real world.
More of a strong influence.
Yeah. Style influence and culture influence, perhaps. Anyway, I just wanted to jump in and say one of the reasons why we're really keen for this Deadset Legends is that in tournaments you can actually get NAF approval and have your own custom Blood Bowl player. And this is not unusual in Australia. Southern Shrike Bowl in South Australia, big shout out to those guys. They are Deadset Legends in their own right. They have a custom star player available every year of Southern Shrike, which is the most valuable player. I don't know quite how they determine who the MVP is.
They collect star player points, possibly.
Yeah, so their MVP for each season becomes a star player, and then they actually get a model made, and then you can purchase that model for Southern Shrike Bowl and use it in the following year.
I've got a couple of those myself.
Yeah, and look, I would be lying if I said I didn't have any either. I have more than one. So what I'm saying is that custom star players are a thing, and you can get NAF approval for your tournament with one. So if you're listening in and you think, oh yeah, Hoshi Komi, that's a cool model, I'd love to use that again, you can officially do it in a tournament that has Hoshi Komi listed as a custom star player. And Thrudball has multiples and still get NAF approval. I think they have about 6 star players.
They're the only star players they allow at Thrudball is the made-up star players.
Correct. So what I'm saying is there's definitely the ability to bring Hoshi Komi back and get NAF approval.
Well, I think we've just got Drew from 3 Die Block. He's back on our side now after you slammed him for his slam. For those people that don't know, Drew Bucciccone does have a complete Hoshi Komi team. I believe he's just coloured the bases separate colours and plays them as possibly human, I'm not sure, but he does have a Hoshi Komi team.
Yes, yeah, he does love Hoshi Komi. And also, just the other thing that Drew would be on our side for is that 3 Die Brawl, which is 3 Die Block's feature tournament that they run every year. This year, they have their own custom star, who is Mega Critter.
Mega Critter, yes.
And it's running the same time as Cane Toad Cup, 15th, 16th of June.
Okay, so if you can't make it to Iowa, I believe, come on down to Loganholme in Brisbane, Queensland.
And that's the only 2. No.
So you've got some info there on Hoshi Komi.
Yes. And in fact, we are not the first to attempt to drag Hoshi Komi from 2nd edition back to the current era of Blood Bowl. There is a very big change in rules between 2nd edition and 3rd edition. Really, I would say, a bit like the Roman Empire, we're kind of still in 3rd edition, but it's kind of... it's a modified version of 3rd edition. So the guts of the game really haven't changed since 1994. That's my position, and I will die defending that position, whether it's accurate or not. Big changes between now and then, don't hear me wrong. But back in 4th edition days, release old models and you could buy them and they just provide new stats. So Hoshi Komi did that, and that's still been a thing up until relatively recently. At the Bugman's Bar in Nottingham, which is the headquarters of Games Workshop or Warhammer, if you don't know, they run the only official GW tournaments other than the 4 events they run in the US. They're the only places where you can go to an official Blood Bowl tournament in terms of the most official. Let's not get into how official is official. That's a rabbit hole, and I think Drew would have some discussion with us on that one, whether the NAF's official or unofficial. Anyway, they had an event at Bugman's, and at that tournament, you could pay a sum of money and get 5 of the old second edition star players, including at the time Frank N. Stein and Bile Rot Vomit Flesh. And at the time, they didn't have rules for the current edition, so you could buy that as a pack. And it wasn't Hoshi Komi, but they did way back in, as I said, early 2000, in fact 2000 itself. It was when the inaugural Blood Bowl magazine was released. Hoshi Komi had some stats, and that was produced by the mail order team to sell old models. Back then, they had the stat line of Hoshi Komi having movement 8, strength 3, which is interesting because second edition he had 2, agility 4, which is the same as agility 2 plus today. There was no passing stat back then, and armour of 7, which is the same as 8 plus today. At the ripe cost of 120k, which is an absolute bargain by today's standards, but that was pretty common comparing star players of that era to today. Could only play for human teams, so couldn't play for anybody else. Remember, this is pre-Imperial Nobles. And has catch, dodge, and leap as the stat line. So, what we thought we'd do for this segment, Millsy, what are we doing?
What we're going to do is, all 3 of us have done a little bit of homework ourselves. We've gone through separately and brought Hoshi Komi back in our own way. So we'll get all 3 of us to present what they've come up with their edition. And I don't know, you can vote on it, you can ignore us. You're probably going to ignore the rest of the podcast, so go right ahead.
I tell you what, send us an email on downunderworlddenizens@gmail.com or post on our Facebook group. Find us, Down Underworld Denizens, on Facebook. Join our private group. That way you can chat about whatever without your bosses seeing what you're posting about. Join us there. Tell us what you would do with Hoshi Komi.
Yeah. And if you've got Hoshi Komi models or alternate Hoshi Komi models that you use in his place, please feel free to post them up there.
So just on that, that's one of the things that Down Underworld Denizens are a huge fan of, is grabbing a model that's not necessarily intended for Blood Bowl, or maybe it is, but grabbing some other model and converting it, like changing it to be suitable. So there's lots of Asian style models that you could use for Hoshi Komi. Maybe if you've done something like that for Hoshi Komi, post a picture. We'd love to see.
Post a picture, post the backstory with the team, whatever. The more info, the better. We love the game of Blood Bowl, and that pretty much, you could put a full stop after that. So we love the game. We're not fussed on which miniatures you use, as long as we can clearly tell which ones they are, and we'll probably come up on a future podcast when we talk about these sorts of things. We don't care what you're using, as long as we can see it and go, okay, that's what it is, let's play.
It did cause a minor stir at Sunny Coast Slam when somebody showed up with Lego Stormtroopers as their Blood Bowl team.
I did see that team. I didn't get a chance to play. Should we name those? No, we're going
to. So maybe we need a poll. Maybe we need a poll in our Facebook group. Are Lego Blood Bowl teams okay or not?
There's also apparently a tradition of Lego teams making an appearance at the one of the Gold Rush in Victoria.
Gold Crush.
Gold Crush. There's apparently a history of Lego teams turning up there, so much that they have their own tier of list building if you actually turn up with Lego.
There we go. I think that's fair. I think there needs to be some kind of penalty. Because, what do you do for painted? I mean, you didn't paint them.
You didn't paint them, no.
Unless you did.
Unless you did.
Maybe it's best based.
What? Lego?
Yeah. Which block did you use? Was it a 4x2 or a...
And just to go out on Australianism, there's no such thing as Legos. Sorry, the plural of Lego is Lego as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Damn it, I'll die on a hill for that
one. One sheep, 2 sheep, 1 Lego, 2 Lego.
Yep, I'm with you.
100%. Well, if you're with us, Dan, how about you give us your version, what you've come up with for your version of Hoshi Komi 2.0, or Hoshi Komi 2020.
Well, I've been very adventurous. I've stuck with the 4th edition mail order trials stat line overall, but I figured I'd spend a bit more time on the actual star player special rule, which is all the rage in the 2020 Blood Bowl rules. Every star player gets their own special rule to add some flavour. So sticking with the basic stat line, catch, dodge, and leap just for a bit of fun. But my special rule, because the character model has a kendo helmet, and because he's in a defensive pose with his karate, my special rule is defensive block.
Okay. As opposed to the skill defensive.
As opposed to the skill defensive or the skill block. I mean, the name can change, but patent pending. Defensive block. My version of Hoshi Komi doesn't actually have block, but when he's the target of a block action or a blitz, he gains the block skill for the rest of that activation.
I like it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's nice.
So if you want to blitz him, you're going to be doing it tough.
Yeah.
He's got dodge.
Well, he's got dodge already, yeah. And he's strength 3, according to the way you've designed him.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So your version of Hoshi Komi is really a catcher. Now, what have you thought about, obviously, in the mail order troll version of Hoshi Komi, he could only play for humans. Would it be Old World Classic only?
Keeping with the standard sort of building that the 2020 edition goes, it would have to be Old World Classic, because they don't actually limit it to specific teams anymore. So Old World Classic would definitely be the designation that he would have. If you could limit it to specific teams, I would probably go more to Humans, Imperial Nobles, and Old World Alliance only. But there's not currently the option for that.
Yeah,
I'm with you, Dan. Bring back race-specific teams for these star players. I'm not a fan of opening up to everyone.
I'm a massive fan of what you're arguing for. I think, well, certainly what I will say is I think that the reason why the rules design team went the way there was to sell models, and that's never a good plan. You put the sales behind devising a good game, right? I mean, if the game's good, people will buy the models, not the other way around. Yep. So, unfortunately, we've got this situation where star players like Hackflem, cough cough, plays for teams he really shouldn't. So that's the problem, and I think there does need to be done something about it. Now, the easiest solution is go backwards in time, but there could be another option out there.
Yeah.
But just on that, that's something we want to talk about. We've got Millsy on here. He's the variant king. I love a good house rule set, as people on Blood Bowl community will full well know. So, yeah, we will talk about that future podcast, but we're straying off topic.
We are. So let's get back on the topic. Did you come up with a cost for him?
I would have been aiming around 150,000, which lines up with Skitter Stab as a recently released star player. Gives a bit of versatility without getting super expensive, because he's really not super that much better than a standard human catcher. Obviously, strength 3 is a benefit, but...
and you have to cost that accordingly, but you've done that with 150k.
Yeah, that looks good.
It sounds about right.
And it's certainly not a game-breakingly powerful piece.
No, I guess that's true.
I think that's where you've got to aim these star players at, is not game-breaking, but performing a niche on a team. So
you got to try and make them usable where people might feel like wanting to use it, but not that they have to use it every game to be competitive.
The only trouble is Old World Classic would include dwarves, so dwarves could have Hoshi Komi.
Well, it
also includes halflings and gnomes.
A movement 8 player on a dwarf team would be very handy.
And hence the problem Millsy was raising.
Yes.
All right.
Alrighty, Mr. Babbage.
Yes, mate.
What have you got for Hoshi Komi? You've
Did the dog eat your homework, or have you brought something?
I've brought something. Don't worry, mate. Oh, mate, the dog ate your homework. That's so last century, mate. It's my computer crashed and yeah, that's it. My hard drive spacked it, and I needed a new machine. Yeah, that's the current version.
Is, on his long drive home from Agnes Waters, regularly phones in, and he's hinted, but he's just left it at a hint. So I'm dying to find out.
Yeah.
What Babbage.
Look, there's a couple of ways I could have designed Hoshi Komi, right? I could have tried to be as true as possible to the second edition star player, which you want to honour the past, and I'm huge into that, in case you missed it. But I wanted to do two things. I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to really lean into the fluff and the character of the star player. And I love that element of Blood Bowl. The Blood Bowl has all this lore and history and... elements that are very role-playing-esque, and in fact I think that's a big plus for Blood Bowl, and one of the things that only playing at tournaments misses out on is this character development that goes on. So I wanted to make this star player have a whole bunch of fluff and lore that goes with it. So Hoshi Komi, I think, is meant to be a ninja character, even though, as Dan alluded to, the model itself looks like a kendo outfit more than a ninja outfit. But let's just lean into the ninja outfit, right? And I did try and mitigate, but he's a ninja. So the first thing is he's going to have stab.
Yes.
Right? So he's a stabber, right? And so actually, in some ways, he's going to be quite similar to Skidder Stab, because Skidder Stab is a gutter runner with stab. Hoshi Komi is a catcher with stab. So that's what I'm using as the baseline for cost. But he's a ninja stabber. So he comes with block, right? Block is definitely there in second edition. So he's going to add block to his starting catch skills, but he's going to lose catch, right? He's not somebody that's come with catch out of second edition. So I'm dropping it.
Yeah, interesting that he is a catcher for the Cleveland Crescents, but he did not actually have the catch skill when originally come out.
And so I'm kind of designing him a bit more like a Dark Elf assassin, right? So he's a stabber, right? Like his job is to take out the ball carrier. So he's kind of moving a bit beyond the catcher. So catcher stat line, but he's more of an assassin. So he's got block, he's got dodge, he's got stab, and I'm giving him pogo stick. All right, now you might think, what? He'd never had a pogo? No. It's like the slan. He doesn't have pogo. He has legs that mean that he can leap. He's martial arts expert at jumping over players. So, think martial art movies, they use wires and whatever in real life, but, in the movies, they can do amazing things. And I know he doesn't have a wall to leap off, which is what actual ninjas would do, but I'm going to say he's got pogo stick to represent his ninja jump ability. And because he's a ninja, I've given him 2 extra fluff areas. The first I'm giving him is sidestep. All right. Now, actually, I was tossing up between whether I give him sidestep or whether I give him trickster with the gnomes team coming out. I like the idea of trickster, and I thought about trickster long and hard because you go to block him and he's not there. That's quite ninja-ish.
I could see him being a trickster.
Yeah. So could be either. Could be trickster, although obviously he's not a gnome and the skill doesn't quite name it. But then again, I've already gone pogo stick and he doesn't have a pogo. Other option would be sidestep. They kind of assume, they kind of do the similar kind of thing. But his special skill is smoke bomb. All right, so he's got the ability to
ninja with smoke.
To throw down the little bomb that blows the smoke and then he vanishes, right? So once per game, after Hoshi Komi is blocked but not knocked down, Hoshi may employ a smoke bomb. After the opponent chooses whether to follow up or not, roll a d6. On a 2+, the opponent is momentarily blinded by the smoke from the bomb thrown at his feet. He immediately ends his activation and loses his tackle zone until his next activation.
So you gave Hoshi Komi Hypnogaze.
After being blocked.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's right. So it's not in his turn, so yeah. But it's only once per game.
Once per game. That doesn't sound broken. Yeah, I like it. Did we come up with a cost?
Yeah, I was again
You'd
using.
have to be stacking it pretty high with all of that.
Well, Hoshi Komi comes in not completely broken. He's 100. Well, Skidder Stab's 180k. Now I dropped his movement from 8, which is what we think he would be in second edition, to 7. So 7, 2, 2+, 5+ passing, 8+ armor, 195k.
195. That's not too far.
Pretty aggressive.
Yeah, my big problem is really that his special skill of smoke bomb could potentially be used if somebody's trying to chase him down with the ball. Like Hoshi's got the ball. Somebody's trying to chase him down. Don't knock him down. Hoshi Komi just uses a smoke bomb and then straight into score. But it's only once per game. And if you had other players that could move in, I mean, he's got dodge and he's got AG 2+ anyway.
And you've given him pogo as well, so he's getting away regardless.
He's getting away,
Yeah.
Ignoring tackle zones. Fantastic. Well, I've got my version. I actually came up with it 2 different ways, cost-wise. The first one I'll give you is, basically I went to, how could I build Hoshi Komi now? I would start with a human catcher. And then through the regular skill-ups, I would gain the skills or gain the passing ability and so on. So, my Hoshi Komi 8, same as the movement 4, sprint 4, strength 2 as the original, AG 2 plus, passing ability 4 plus, and AV would be 9 plus. He used to be 8, so to get it in line with what it would currently be, he has block, same as in the original, dodge, same as the original, jump up, same as the original, leap. Now, I've taken it, well, I think Mr. Babbies has come out of my book here. Leap level 4, I've given him pogo stick as well. Mighty blow.
Well, you know what they say, fools never differ. You thought I was going to say great minds think alike, weren't you?
Yes. I was. You've stumped me there. I've given him something else that no one's thought of, or no one's listed down there. He will be loner 4 plus. In keeping.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So that's almost a given.
I've given him a skill that he didn't actually have to start with. Catch. Now, he didn't start with catch in there, but I thought what catcher would start without catch, so I've given him that. My little twist on this is he originally had a skill called Itchy Feet, which meant that at the end of that game, he left your team. Originally, you could hire star players to stay on the team. So, to mirror Itchy Feet, as in, I'm just going to play with you and go, don't care about you guys, I've given him Animosity.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, and Itchy Feet wasn't unique to Hoshi Komi. At least one of the ogres in the old second edition star players had Itchy Feet as well. Basically, yeah, it meant that at the end of the game, that was it. They were out of there.
So I've given him Animosity, and I would say Animosity to all teammates. Making it from a human catcher cost me 205,000. So that's passing ability was plus 20.
That's an expensive calculation.
Yeah. Oh no, this is the cheap one. Plus armor was 10. Block was plus 20. I did take 10 off for adding a negative skill or negative trait. Animosity. Jump up was plus 20, so it's a regular skill. Pogo stick would be plus 40. Mighty blow plus 40. 205,000. Now, if I went to the Death Zone, which is what I originally went to, the 2020 version of Death Zone, and skilling up a
mercenary,
creating a mercenary star player, doing all of the same, he came out to 310,000.
There's no way he's worth that kind of cost.
No, so
nobody's going to take him at that price.
No one would take him at 310. I thought, well, how can we do this? What's going up? What's going? So yeah, that was why I went to. Well, let's just get the closest player I can and skill him up from there. I didn't give him a once a game, once a turn, once a half skill. Not a big fan of those. So yeah, there's my version of Hoshi Komi 2.0.
Yeah. So, on the pod, we'll put up our stat lines and we'll be interested to see which one you think is the best version. Not necessarily which one's the most powerful player, but which one you think is the most cool or best representation of him on the Blood Bowl pitch.
I'll take any vote you give me.
Oh, right, you're bribing already, are you?
Vote 1, Melzy.
I'll give you a shout out on the next episode.
And also, while we're there, maybe we might even put up a little bit of a poll about, which Deadset Legend do you want to see us chat and bring back from the dead?
Yeah, we have done our homework and might have a couple up our sleeves already, but if there's someone that you're dying to see back on the pitch, dead set, get it? If you're dying to see someone back on the pitch, give us a call. We'll give us a shout out. We'll put him on.
Sorry, mate. I think that joke was dead in the water.
Well.
All right. Hey, we're going to move on. We're going to talk now about Australianisms. Now, we are Ocker, all three of us. There's an Australianism right there. The fact that we're Ocker just means Aussie, means Australian. And this is another segment that we've got in Down Under World Denizens, focusing on the Down Under. What does it mean to be Down Under? We're not all Crocodile Dundee. We don't all wrestle crocodiles in our spare time. Yes, no, that's it. There's a classic Australian right there. But we wanted to talk Strine. That is, what is Aussie slang? And in particular, how do you use it playing a sports tabletop miniature board game? So, today, I thought we'd start with something fairly typical of Australian slang. It's a pretty famous one. Most people would know about it. And the word is struth.
Struth, mate.
Struth.
Yeah, struth. Now, I've done my homework, done a little bit of research. Apparently, it's an abbreviation for God's truth. That actually, it was an exclamation of surprise or shock. Something unlikely's happened, and it's a kind of an abbreviation of God's truth, and used to exclaim surprise. Something unusual's happened.
I'm glad you explained that, because I'm looking across at Dan here. He looks a bit young. I don't think he knew what struth was. Now, Dan, being the youngest on our podcast here, when was the last time you used struth?
Personally, never. Used in my general vicinity was probably about 20 years ago.
Wow.
I did work with some old fellas in a electrical repair shop at one point, and they had plenty of old-fashioned slang going around. I did not actually know previously that it was an actual abbreviation for God's truth, but I'm surprised it doesn't see more use in Queensland, being that Queensland is God's own country, also known as God's own.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on from there. Let's not get a big discussion about God and country and all the rest of it. So when would we use struth in Blood Bowl?
It'd have to be that 1 in a million play. You've just pulled it off. You've had 4 or 5 plus dodges in a row, in the rain, whatever it happens to be, and you struth, I pulled it off. I made it.
Give us an example. Is there something you did recently with your slan that you can say, yeah, that was when you should have said struth?
I can't say with my slan recently, but one of my all-time plays, long time back, turn 15, I had an orc thrower, had tripped over trying to get the ball, and it had bounced into the last corner of the end zone. So turn 16, in this pouring rain, it says I've stood up, stepped onto the ball, picked it up, gone for it twice, threw the ball the entire length of the range ruler to an open square to get it to bounce forward 3 times into the hands of a goblin in a tackle zone, who then had 3 dodges out to score. And if that's not a time for struth, I don't know what is.
That's fair.
That's a good effort.
So would you have said it, or would your opponent said it?
I believe my opponent said some words I'm not going to mention.
To that effect.
That reminds me of my example of when to use struth, is Ausbol State Champions. In my very first game. Now, you've got to remember that it's state versus state and territory versus state. I'm representing ACT, and first up we were versus New South Wales, which I knew would be
that's a tough matchup.
Yeah, it would be a big matchup, and the team was a strong team. And I was randomly assigned to play against Rabid Bogscum, or just Rabid for short now. And James Russell Wills, shout out to him. He and I had our first game together. He was playing Amazons, I was playing Old World Alliance. As I said, I've already mentioned that the whole tournament didn't go particularly my way. But I kicked short. The ball was behind the line of scrimmage, pretty close to the line of scrimmage. He ran in with his Amazon thrower, went to pick up the ball and failed the pickup. So the ball was there. Now, he could have used a reroll. The Amazon didn't have sure hands. So could have used a reroll, chose not to. I had Griff on my Old World Alliance team, right? So
Griff.
Yeah.
I know where this is going.
That's exactly right, mate. So dodged in. Don't ask how many 4 pluses and 3 pluses there were. Picked up the ball, dodged back out again into my own half to keep safe. I think that would have been a fair and appropriate time to use struth if you're James Russell Wills at that point. And let's just say, I don't think he actually said anything, but his facial expression gave it all away.
Said it all. What was the final score in that game?
Let's just say that James just showed how much I still have to pick my game up. He beat me 2-1. It was a very close game, but he actually got me.
I had similar with Rabbit when I played him. It was a 2-1. Carla was just annoying. I was playing Necro, and for some reason my dice just...
That's right. Yeah, he had Carla and I had Griff. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no. And Rabbit is a brilliant coach.
Yeah. And I was sitting pretty because once I got that ball with Griff, I scored. So I was up 1-0 and I'd kicked to him. I was like, yeah, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Nah, not when you're playing James. There's no such thing as a given.
No, certainly not.
So what about you, Dan? Got a time you want to talk about when Struth would have been appropriate?
Oh, usually it's going the other way. Like, instead of Paul's successful length of the field touchdowns, it's usually me going for the miracle plays and then just rolling a 2.
Yeah, although...
Unfortunately, Struth gets used a fair bit. If that's your criteria.
Yeah, that's right.
Plenty of hard-fought games. I've had a bunch of draws. A lot of them plenty enjoyable enough. But you get down to turn 16, you've got one turn, you've got one chance, you've got one player ready, and you fail the ball pickup, or you don't get the pass off, or any number of things go wrong because you just can't roll that 6.
Yeah.
I love those plays when you get down to, like you said, turn 16, and you talk it through with your opponent. So I'm going to dodge away from your guy with prehensile tail, then I'm going to go through here and 5+ dodge into here, 3+ dodge there, 4+ dodge, 5+ pickup, 2 more dodges, and then you fail your first one.
Oh, you ogre boneheads.
This amazing, heroic play, and you failed your first roll. It's just, yeah.
It's times like that you're tempted to pick up your dice and hurl them across the room.
Would you rather fail the first roll in that whole sequence or fail the last roll in that whole sequence?
Yeah.
Which one hurts the most?
Ooh, interesting question.
Yeah.
Because, if you fail the first one, hopefully the ball's still in a reasonably protected position. So, maybe the first one's the best. But then again, it's lovely to see you get all the way through.
Yeah.
It's the things legends are made of, until it isn't.
It's coming down to tripwire material, isn't it? So, tripwire, for those people that don't know, is going for it into the end zone.
Yeah, that's it.
I still call it going for it. None of this rush stuff from the newfangled guys. Going for it into the end zone and hitting that tripwire. It's just, your hopes are up. You're like, yes, I've got the tie, I've got the win, I'm going up, yes. No, down I go.
Yeah. All right, so we are moving on. We are on to our second last segment. Coming up, what is coming up in Down Under World Denizens future episodes? So, episode 2, we have our first guest commentator. I've made allusions to that. We are hoping to have a past NAF president on our podcast. So if you want to know what is the NAF, what does the NAF do, what does the NAF not do, and let's face it, there has been some pretty interesting chat this year about what the NAF does or doesn't do, and what is within their scope to do and not do, then listen in. We'll be chatting all things NAF, or NAF for short. So there's one thing coming up. Also, we want to focus on some big tournaments, and as mentioned, we're going to go live, have a section of our podcast at Cane Toad Cup, episode 2. Hopefully, our friend Chris Stratford will be live on hand.
So it's a TO, so hopefully one of us might come away with the win there, and we can talk to the eventual champion. And it's going to be pushing it uphill. There's 40 plus players there already, so it's going to be a big tournament, so looking forward to that, and finding out from Chris what goes into running, I'm going to say, a successful tournament. How do you go about that? What's he done differently, getting his thoughts on it, and then we're probably, whilst we've got microphones there, interviewing quite a number of, I call them my Blood Bowl family now. All of those people that I meet at tournaments that come back, they're just regulars. They're my family I get to choose. Not everyone gets on with their family. I do, but not everyone does. But your Blood Bowl family is that one you get to choose. So having a chat with those guys and catching up is always an amazing thing to do. So hopefully we hear from some of them.
That's why we do it.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Dan? What's something you're looking forward to in a future podcast?
So future podcasts, we've also got work table. Everyone does their what's your weekly hobby project. We can certainly make time for that and have a couple of mentions. You were talking about getting some 3D printed teams, putting a spotlight on a couple of Kickstarters coming up.
Yeah, for sure. Because, as mentioned, we're not Blood Bowl exclusive, and we want to talk about miniatures and other accessories that can be used for a variety of tabletop miniatures. So, we want to talk about all kinds of miniatures that you could use for a variety of these games. Now, just to throw it out there, Mantic came up with a kind of science fiction sports game. Dreadball, yeah. So, and there was a lot of interest from the Blood Bowl community about using the models for Dreadball in Blood Bowl. Now, the scale wasn't quite the same, but that's pretty common between Mantic and GW games.
It's also pretty common between Games Workshop from 30 years ago and Games Workshop today.
That's true. And let's not talk about differences in scale between Blood Bowl miniatures produced by Games Workshop, because there's a bit of an issue right there. But, so, absolutely. Can you grab a team from Dread Ball and make it applicable for Blood Bowl? Absolutely. Can you do the opposite? Grab a Blood Bowl team and make it suitable for Dread Ball? Sure you can.
Why not?
So, and we want to absolutely lean into that. That's a part of the hobby. That's part of what we want to discuss. Obviously, we're a podcast. We don't have video, but that's why we have the Facebook group, so we can put photos up and share what we're doing.
No, I have a face for podcasts. It works well.
You're not alone.
This is why we do not have a video feed here. Yeah, we'll be talking about what's on our painting table. We might even do a bit of that today. One of my things is variants, so we're going to be going through in depth into some different variants of Blood Bowl, Sevens, Beach Bowl, Bridge Bowl, Arena Bowl. If you don't know what they are, keep listening. Just more of the same, but we're going to eventually lead up to, for those people that starting off with humble beginnings of where we are here, you're playing in your local league. Okay, you've got to go to the next step. You've got to start playing in some tournaments. Then you've got to go interstate. Then you've got to go playing for your country or in your country, and then looking at going globally, going over to the next country over from you. For a lot of you guys in Europe, that's a thing already. But for us people here, where we go on road trips and are still in our own state, international competitions is a big thing. So we'd like to build up to that. So if you're wanting to know, what do I need to do to be able to go to those things? What do I need to pay for? What do I need to book? What's some hints and tips and so on? We'll have some more guest presenters, commentators on that in future episodes as well.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you will too. I hope you'll stay with us on this podcast journey. Just to close this out, final question. What is on your hobby table? Why don't we go there? Dan said he was looking forward to it. Let's not keep everything in reserve.
I've got to finish painting off my teams for the current season in their local leagues. Both my vampires and my old world are resplendent in a full coat of contrast paint, which gets them at least fully painted. At least there's no undercoat showing. But getting some details and extra bits to finish them off properly will certainly be a high priority.
And that's one of our little local league tips for you at home, is we like to say that, if you just want to assemble your team ready for week one, that's all you need. And then you've got the whole season to get them painted. As long as they're painted in time for the finals, then you're in. But but if you're not painted by the finals, you can miss out. I don't know that we've ever enforced it, but that's the rule, at least.
I don't know if we've ever enforced anything in our league.
Oh, settle down.
No, I mean, we've never put the hard word on anyone to do anything. It's like we're fairly laid back.
Everyone's had paint on their models in some fashion.
Yeah, that's
one
true.
way or another.
That's true. And so on my paint table, I'm the same as Dan. I've got my Happy Rock Hound Dogs. They are my halflings. They are actually miniatures that are produced by Grebo. They're called the Cutimals. We might even talk about Cutimals at some point in the future. I've appropriated them for the use of Blood Bowl, and I've made them fit my halfling team. They weren't designed for that, but who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah, that's it. I'm using them as that. It's no different to Millsy here using platypuses and penguins.
That is one of my favourite teams all time. For those people that don't know, I've got an Underworld team. I love penguins, so all of my goblins are penguins. I have a bunch of platypuses, which are my Skaven linemen. I've got a cane toad for my blitzer. I've got a shark throwing the ball as my thrower. I've got a water monitor as my gutter runner. I've got a shark as my troll. And my whole stick with that, I wrote a complete backstory, was this old Blood Bowl player was sitting around the billabong one day and this parchment flies in it, lands in his feet, and he hears about this new league starting up of Blood Bowl. And one thing is, he is a bit dyslexic, so when he reads it, he thinks it says Underwater Denizens team. And that's why he went about getting all those players. But that was a past painting table for me. Currently for me, I still have, believe it or not, 7 players to paint for my Slam team. I do have the entire team painted. Chris Tattersall from Tats Tabletop up in Cairns approached our league as being a sponsor, sent us down a team. I thought, mate, this is great. What else have you got? He hooked me up. he got in touch with Punga and got the rights to 3D print their model. So I have the Punga Slan team, which is just immaculate, amazing.
Let's just be clear for a moment. They're not Slan. They are miniatures that can be used as Slan.
Is this like Prince? Is this the entertainer formerly known as Prince? No, these are Slan. Bring them back. I'm starting a campaign because I was reaching out to him and getting that, and he was, he's got the contract or whatever it is to print those now. When I ordered the team off him, he gave me the entire team. So I have like 35, 36 models. So I've got enough painted. I've been playing them for quite a while now, so I still have 7 of those to go. Who knows after that?
Awesome. Well, we might close out this episode. We've probably gone a little longer than what we plan to do in this first inaugural episode. As we find our groove, we'll probably tighten up. But just stay tuned. We would love to have you on listening to our podcast regularly. We'd love to hear where you're from. Yeah, we want to be as interactive as we can. Send us an email. Jump on the Facebook group. This is Babs signing out.
And this is Milsey saying see you later.
And this is Dan saying I'll see you next time.
Down Under World Denizens discusses Games Workshop's games and products such as Blood Bowl, Gutter Bowl, Dungeon Bowl, and Crunch. We also discuss other fantasy football board games and concepts from other companies, such as Guild Ball, Grind, Dread Ball, Elf Ball, Myth and Goal, Blitz Bowl, Chaos Ball, Monsters of the Midway, and Feud Ball. We discuss products and services such as miniatures or software made by producers suitable for several of these board games. Games Workshop's terms and conditions in point 2.1 state they grant the user the non-exclusive right to use their authorised intellectual property for broadcasting and other media-related activities such as commentary and opinion pieces, blogs, and other similar informational and descriptive purposes. Down Under World Denizens respects and honours these terms. Out from us. Until next time.
That was brilliant.